It is Monday, August 23rd here at Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York, and you are about to be looking live at tonight's FFPC main event draft room. Our pal Kevin English is going to be drafting from the 11th spot in this chase for the $500K top prize, and we're going to be tracking all the action. I'm your host, Matt Schauf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. In case you missed it, Jared and Adam Krautwurst tag teamed their own main event draft entry last night. Jared, how'd that go, and where can people find the results from that?
Yeah, Guilds, at the _ Guilds on Twitter drafted with us too. I know he's a high stakes veteran, so it's nice to have him on board. I think we might have drafted the $500,000 winner last night. I was very happy with our team. Mixon made it back to us in late round 2, which I always love, and then Mike Evans made it to us in late round 4.
It's Adam happy.
Made Adam happy, yeah. So it's a nice team. We'll have the live stream of that up on the Draft Sharks YouTube channel by the end of tonight, so everyone can watch that. And you can also just look at the board right now on the Draft Sharks Twitter. It's up there.
Mm-hmm. And you can head to the Draft Sharks Discord and you can give your own opinions on the picks that they made. If you want to join up for free there, you can find a link in the YouTube post. You can find the link in our Twitter feed, various places at this point, plenty of the podcast posts. It's out there. So if you want to join us in the Discord for free, talk to us, talk to other experienced players, we're there waiting for you. So tonight, though, we are primarily here to watch Kevin's draft, to track the action in the FFPC main event, to see how they're drafting and to see how Kevin drafts and to just see like how this group of experienced drafters build their team. So Jared, I think you're probably scouting this because you have your own draft coming up later this week, right?
I do. And I'm picking 11 in the same exact spot as Kevin. So I want to give some thoughts tonight, but I don't want to give too much away because I don't know if any of my competitors are going to be watching this and then, knowing who I'm targeting it in my pick. So I have a ton of experience drafting from like 9, 10, 11. I swear, like 50% of my draft slots this year have been like, in that back third. So I feel comfortable. It's not my favorite spot to draft, but I at least feel comfortable, kind of know, who's going to be there at each of my, first, 4, 5, 6 picks at least.
Do you think it's comfier being close to one of the turns, or do you think it's better to be in the middle so you don't miss out on runs?
Yeah, I would rather be in the middle, and if I'm at a turn, I'd rather be at the front of round 1. But you can win from any spot. I plan to do so.
Right. Yeah, you can't use your spot as the excuse why you didn't win. So starting in this draft, of course, we got Christian McCaffrey going first. This is tight end premium. In case anybody watching is unfamiliar with the FFPC format, we should run through that real quick. So you start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers. There's 1 tight end spot and then 2 flex that can be running back, wide receiver, or tight end. Tight ends score 1.5 points per reception in this format. It's just regular PPR for everybody else. So obviously we're going to see tight ends pushed up the board. We saw that already with the 3rd pick in this one, although it's not a crazy spot in any draft at this point for Travis Kelce. So tight end premium, you're going to see tight ends going earlier. They're the purple ones, so watch out for them as they go. We did have Christian McCaffrey go first, as I mentioned. Dalvin Cook went second. You see Travis Kelce go as early as second in some of these main event drafts and other FFPC-style tournaments. Travis Kelce third here, Jared, and then Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry. Nothing out of the ordinary in those top 5 picks.
No, that's a bit higher than usual for Henry. I'm looking at the FFPC main event ADP on Draft Sharks right now, and Henry's gone 1-7 recently, so a few spots higher. Zeke Elliott is kind of the faller here, going at the 1-8 there, and then Darren Waller is another faller who our boy Kevin picks up there. His ADP has been 1-9, so Kevin got him at a discount there at 1-11.
Yeah, and he did come back, Darren Waller, from the injury. The injury that was kind of a murky situation for a while, but he was returned to practice. So you wonder if maybe some people are still apprehensive because of that situation. But it's nice value, I think, for Kevin at the 11th spot in this tight end premium draft to be able to get Waller right there.
And he comes back with Saquon Barkley. So I like this start a lot. And we talked about it on our stream last night, but it's obviously a hefty entry fee, but you're trying to win $500,000 by coming in first place. So I do think you want to take some gambles in this format. And Saquon Barkley is a gamble, even in early round 2. But if he's healthy, even if he's healthy from October on, the big money weeks in this contest are 15, 16, 17, and it's a total points race. So try to get to that. And then if Barkley, Saquon Barkley, and he's a top 3 running back, then Kevin's in business.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how he treats running back behind Barkley, because I think that drafting Barkley means you need to be a little bit more sure about getting some insurance, especially some early season starters at that position. But I agree, the upside's there. So would you be comfy taking Saquon Barkley anywhere in round one at this point, or is it once you get to round two, it gets to be okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally Saquon's your RB2. So you get an Aaron Jones or an Austin Eckler, then you come back with Saquon as your RB2, which kind of builds in a cushion. But I mean, to me, anywhere in round two, the risk is worth the potential payoff, again, especially in a format like this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it sounds kind of funny to say something like I wouldn't take him at 11, but you could take him at 14. It's obviously not that big a difference, but you already have gotten a first round type ahead of him. You've laid somewhat of a foundation before you take the shot on Barkley. So, I mean, at some point there has to be a line, and I think that that's a fair line to draw. Yeah. After Ezekiel Elliott, we did have Austin Eckler. We had Aaron Jones. Those guys have been pretty typically showing up in the second half of round one lately. Aaron Jones, for a while, was in round two, but I think at this point he looks more like a late round one pick, right?
Yeah, that's about exactly where I'd take Aaron Jones. I think to me the first 11 players to me should be the first 11 players in these FFPC drafts. Najee Harris, a climber there going at the 1-2 term, which I really don't have much of an issue with. Even before we saw anything in the preseason, you sort of thought he was going to be near the top of the league in total touches, and he's been acting as a workhorse. I'm almost too much. I kind of want the Steelers to back off him in the preseason at this point. But it's pretty obvious he's going to handle the vast majority of backfield work in Pittsburgh. So I have no issue with him at the 1-2 turn there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, the concerns are the offensive line. The offense wasn't awesome last season. It was very pass heavy, but we know that they're not going to lean that much toward the pass. They fired the OC at the end of the season, so it's clear they don't even want to go that pass heavy. They drafted Najee Harris in round one, so clearly they want to lean on him. And like you said, they're playing more than I think is comfy for any of us in the preseason, where we really don't need to see that much. So you can have concerns, but at this point you're banking on that workhorse usage, and there just aren't that many guys that you're going to get that from.
Exactly. Yeah. So Kevin takes Barkley behind Harris, and you have DeAndre Hopkins going ahead of Stephon Diggs. So Stephon Diggs, a bit of a faller here. I like that start, Eckler and Diggs. That's a nice start. I would love to get that tomorrow night or Thursday night. Diggs had the knee injury that had him out of practice for a week and a half, but he was back yesterday. So I'm not super concerned about that. I think he's a value where he went here.
Yeah, it's tough to navigate these summer injuries. I mean, as soon as somebody goes down, you're like, oh crap, what am I doing? My draft's tonight or my draft's Friday. I mean, obviously we're covering all this in the Shark Bite section, and we're trying to gauge how serious everyone is. And it takes watching each of them because they differ greatly. But I agree. You don't have to worry about Diggs. We don't have to worry about Darren Waller. Saquon Barkley's looking up. So we'll probably talk about some other injury situations as we move. Stephon Diggs is 11th overall in FFPC main event ADP, according to our numbers on draftsharks.com. So yeah, a little bit later than he's been going. And I agree. You can't hate starting your team here in a PPR format with, a couple guys who could catch 100+ passes in Eckler and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, and then I like to start behind that team as well with Zeke and then Calvin Ridley. Then we have Chubb, and then we have Antonio Gibson, middle of round two, which is 4 or 5 spots later than he sort of was going, at least up into a week or two ago. And we've started to see some preseason action, and it kind of looks like he's in the same role as last year, where he's going to lose some of that third down stuff to McKissick. So where are you at with Gibson? Do you think mid-second is about right for him?
I think it's fair. I've never been totally comfy with what to do with him this year. I guess I'm more wary of overpaying for him than I am of missing out on something special, because I don't believe strongly in the Washington offense, so I don't think he's heading for special touchdowns. And like you just said, they haven't showed us that their actions are matching their words in terms of increasing his receiving role. And I think that's the biggest concern. But you even throw on that the turf toe that hasn't kept him out of working out, but I mean, it hasn't gone away completely, and that's worrisome at this point.
Yeah, the turf toe for me is not something I'm worried about. Like you said, he's practicing. I think he's looked really good in the preseason. And the other thing too is I tweeted, I think he has 5 targets in the preseason on 27 snaps. So it's kind of like a reminder that even if he's not going to play on third downs, Washington's going to scheme stuff up for him in the passing game. So he could still get 50, 60 targets, even if he's losing third down stuff to McKissick. So I don't know, mid second's about right to me. I still, prefer Joe Mixon. But other than that, I think Gibson is fine in the middle of round 2.
That's what I was about to say. My biggest issue with Antonio Gibson tends to be whether Joe Mixon and Najee Harris are still on the board and which wide receivers are still there. Because if DeAndre Hopkins is still there, I feel better about that in general than Antonio Gibson. So looking beyond the Gibson pick here, we had George Kittle go at the 2-7, right behind Gibson. Then it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire ahead of Joe Mixon. So the CEH drafter here not worried about that sprain to the inside of his ankle. Have we gotten any more info on that injury today?
Not that I've seen over the past 2-3 hours. And he's tough because I was almost ready to bump him up our rankings because he'd been playing basically every snap, with Mahomes in that first preseason game and in the second before the injury. And if Edwards-Helaire is going to be an every down player on the Chiefs offense, like he belongs, at least in borderline round 1 territory, I think. So I don't know. We passed on him at the 2-11 last night. He ended up going at the 2-3 turn, so we didn't have that decision in round 3. We had pretty much decided that we weren't going to take him at the 3-2, even if he was there. Just because the ankle thing is worrisome. The inside of the ankle, that's the Michael Thomas injury, and I don't know if it's the same severity or if it's even the same injury, but it sounds like something different than just like your regular old ankle sprain. So it's a bit concerning, at least until we get some more news on it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think at some point in that range, you just go ahead with Edwards-Helaire for now because we don't know more, and they're trying to say that it's minor. But if Joe Mixon's still on the board, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not going to be my pick this week.
Agreed.
Behind him in this draft, DK Metcalf, then it was Joe Mixon, went to the Dalvin Cook team. So that's a Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon start, and then CeeDee Lamb as the third-round pick beyond that. So CeeDee Lamb's the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th wide receiver off the board here. He keeps climbing.
He does, and I've said that Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson are kind of where I draw the line. Like I can't take CeeDee Lamb ahead of those guys. So I think he belongs in like the middle of round 3. So I'm not like far off ADP at this point. He's just a couple wide receivers. I just can't take him over, and I unfortunately haven't landed much CeeDee Lamb, which is a little worrisome because and the preseason usage for Lamb has been exactly what we wanted to see. He's been on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. Even when the Cowboys went 1 wide receiver for a few snaps in that last preseason game, it was Lamb on the field. So I've kind of come around to Lamb being the top Cowboys receiver, even when Amari Cooper's healthy. And Cooper is healthy now. He played in that preseason game, so the ankle isn't a concern for me with Cooper anymore. But I have come around to Lamb being the top fantasy guy there.
Yeah, I can see Lamb being the top guy there, and it certainly wouldn't shock if he has a true breakthrough season. The issue is just where you have to take him. That's a tough spot to get 140 targets.
Yeah.
Or, it's a little bit early to bet on hyper efficiency, and I think you need to get one of those 2 things from him. So, could he ball out this year and have numbers like Justin Jefferson did last year? Sure. But it's a little bit early for me to bet on that happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's more likely to finish top 5 than even Allen and Robinson, as much as I love those guys. But I just think that the target floors that Allen and A-Rob give you, that's what has me leaning towards those guys.
Yeah, I don't think I would call them more likely to hit top 5. I think they're all capable, but to me, the guys who I know are going to get 150 targets are the more likely ones to get there.
It's fair.
After Joe Mixon in round 2, we got back to the Christian McCaffrey drafter, got Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown at the turn. Jared, are you worried at all about A.J. Brown's knee that's kept him out of practice lately, kept him out of Saturday's game? We're not really sure how much longer he'll be out. All we know is that the Titans expect him to be back by the opener.
I mean, it's not ideal. I guess I haven't heard anything that says we should worry. I mean, we know he had the 2 off-season knee surgeries, but he was on the field for the start of camps. I don't know if there was a setback, or I don't know if they're just limiting his reps. He's a guy that's kind of been banged up quite a bit through his first 2 NFL seasons. He kind of plays that type of game where he's like super physical and could lead to injury. So he's a bit risky. But I do still think that this is kind of where he belongs. At least at wide receiver 7, like he was here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the range for him. I have a tough time drafting A.J. Brown ahead of Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson right now because so the knee, he did play through a knee issue last year, missed a couple games, but played through the season with, at the very least, some stuff that needed cleanup after the season. So he had both of his knees cleaned up in the offseason. Maybe this is related to that and he just needs a little bit of rest. We'll see. But, it's one of those that sure, he's shown us he can play through it, but we also don't know how bad it is. So it's kind of tough to gauge at this point. You have to consider how comfy you are, I guess, with betting on him where he goes.
Julio Jones, I think, has been missing a bunch of practices too. And I don't know if he's like hurt or they're just limiting his reps. But that's my biggest concern with Tannehill is just that like those two receivers come with some injury risk and they're just so shallow. There's not much there outside of Brown and Jones. So if one of those guys goes down, that's when I think Tannehill's in trouble.
Yeah, I agree with that. So after A.J. Brown here in round 3, we had CeeDee Lamb go off the board. Then Patrick Mahomes at 303. That's not far from his ADP in these drafts. It's too early to take Patrick Mahomes, and you can see no red or pink, whatever you want to call it, players going after Mahomes so far, and we're almost through round 3 at this point. We have Mahomes number 1 at quarterback. I think most places do. That's not the issue, but I don't think he's a round better than the other guys at the position.
No, and he's going to be like 2 or 3 rounds ahead of like Lamar. I've seen Lamar and Kyler Murray drop into round 6 of these main events. So I think that's when Mahomes looks bad, when you look and he's 3 rounds ahead of someone like that. This team did stack him with Kelsey, which helps, but I'm still not even considering Mahomes until if he had come back in the late 4th for that team, then I think it would have been a fine pick. Yeah,
that was where we landed him on the crowdsourced Draft Sharks main event team, right?
Yep, exactly.
How much are you looking at stacks in these? I mean, it's something to always be aware of, but is it kind of to the same degree as a best ball team, less so?
It's less so for me, but it's still important because, again, those final 3 weeks are the total points race. So you need those big spike weeks, and obviously stacking a quarterback with one or more of his pass catchers helps the chances of getting that.
Mm-hmm. So less so for a regular season league in general, but for this kind of tournament format where you need to win those late sprint weeks, it's more of a factor.
Yeah, I mean, for a home league, home 12-team league, I guess consider a tiebreaker if you're dead even on 2 guys. You take the stack, but otherwise I wouldn't weigh it at all.
Mm-hmm. After Patrick Mahomes here, Kyle Pitts at 304. Right in the range where he usually goes. We've been talking about Kyle Pitts for months. I'm not sure how much there is to say at this point. Where would you take Kyle Pitts if nobody else took him and you're deciding where it's time for you to take him? Where would you draft Kyle Pitts in a tight end premium league? Actually, in general, among tight ends in any kind of PPR.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be my tight end 5 and behind Hockenson. I think Hockenson gets even a little more separation from Pitts here because it is the 1.5 PPR, and I do feel comfortable, projecting Hockenson for more catches than Pitts. So Hockenson goes about where he just went there, early 4th, sometimes late 3rd. So to me, Pitts would be like a mid 4th rounder in FFPC.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, he might be heading for something different than what we've seen from rookie tight ends because it sounds like they're playing him like a wideout, and they have Calvin Ridley and not a whole lot else left at that position.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting that, but still, I don't like him that high.
I agree. Hockenson ahead of Pitts for me, so I'm not the Pitts drafter in pretty much any draft so far. After Pitts here, it was Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, Allen Robinson in the middle of round 3. Terry McLaurin is another guy that's I don't want to bet against him, but he just goes a little bit earlier than is comfy for me. Do you like where he's going? I think he's wide receiver 10 in this particular draft.
Yeah, kind of like with Lamb, it's a few spots earlier. I've taken McLaurin a few times late in round 3, 310, 311, 312. Again, that's another guy where I'm definitely taking Robinson out of McLaurin. I'd even probably lean Lamb over McLaurin as well. So, it's a bit early, but not crazy. He's a good player, and he should be getting much better quarterback play this year.
And again, this is not early versus his ADP in main events. He's going at 303. So far in main event drafts, he's wide receiver 11 off the board, wide receiver 10 here. So really right in line with where he's been going. I agree. I prefer Allen Robinson. I just think a better bet for target volume from what we've seen so far, a more proven player. They both should get better QB play than they got last year. I think that Allen Robinson's QB play should improve more than Terry McLaurin's will, but I guess we'll see. I mean, they're both kind of nebulous. Well, not nebulous situations. The Chicago situation is a little bit nebulous. Washington is how much you trust Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, and how many games Fitz will make it through. I think that's some of the risk with McLaurin.
After Allen Robinson, we had Chris Carson and then Robert Woods, Darrell Henderson off the board. Darrell Henderson late in round 3. That's 310. That's early for him, earlier than he tends to go.
I saw just before we came on too. It sounds like he was like exiting practice with something. I don't want to sound the alarms. I have no idea what it was, but it sounds like he was walking off the field with some trainers. So
that's a mean thing to say during this draft for whoever just drafted him. What he's running back 19 in general in FFPC main event drafts. 402 ADP though. So that's not a whole lot earlier here than he tends to go. And we'll obviously keep track of whatever the injury situation is.
Yeah, I mean, if this guy, has Henderson ranked higher than that, he couldn't count on him making it back to 403, so you take him at 310.
Kevin's third round pick is Mike Evans. Then it was Cooper Kupp at the turn, J.K. Dobbins, and then back to Kevin for DeAndre Swift. So what do you think about his first 4 picks? Darren Waller, Saquon Barkley, Mike Evans, DeAndre Swift.
I think he's off to a great start. Like, I think at 311, he could have gone a few different directions there at wide receiver. I think Cooper Kupp would have made sense. I think Amari Cooper. I think Tyler Lockett, would have been in consideration for me there. And then, on the way back there, I mean, I love Swift. I think he's like a mid third rounder. So where Kevin got him is nice. I think wide receiver was probably in consideration there for Kevin again, with someone like Cooper or Lockett or him. I mean, he could have taken both Bucs wideouts and tried to get Brady later. I've seen some teams do that, but yeah, I mean, Swift at 402 in a full PPR league. I think he's going to catch a lot of passes, and I think he's a good player. So even though we don't like the Lions offense, I like Swift there.
What do you think of the logic of taking both Bucs wide receivers and Tom Brady in a draft like this, where you're setting your lineup every week?
Yeah, I think it's viable. If you don't want to reach for those guys, you don't want to reach way down your wide receiver rankings to take Evans or Godwin. But I mean, they're both guys you feel comfortable putting them in your starting lineup. And again, if Tampa happens to have 2 or 3 big games in that week 15 to 17 stretch, and you have Brady and 2 of his wideouts, you're in business.
To me, it seems to lower the ceiling here, unless you just think that they're going to go crazy this year. I mean, that Tom Brady's going to throw 45 touchdowns and just feed everybody. Otherwise, I think you're necessarily almost every week saying that one of them is going to underperform versus the other. You're taking up 2 slots for what's probably not going to be 2 top-notch performances. I mean, we know that Tom Brady is not likely to be a top 5 quarterback in terms of his weekly scoring floor. He has a lower floor than the rushing QBs. So I don't know. I think that's too much stacking for a lineup setting format.
Yeah, that's fair. I think because Tampa has other weapons, Antonio Brown, Gronkowski's going to be involved, OJ Howard, hopefully. And you got the backs, whether it's Gio Bernard or whoever. So it's not a concentrated offense. So in that way, I think what you're saying makes sense there. But again, I think Evans kind of belongs near that 3-4 turn, and Godwin kind of belongs in the middle of the 4th. So I don't think you're reaching a whole lot to make that stack happen. So I'm okay with it. Again, you need blow up games from that passing game in the FFPC championship round.
I mean, you also need to get enough points to win your league, or at least finish in a position to make those playoffs too.
Yep.
Mike Evans for me is the guy that I'm a little bit wary of this year, because he finished last year something like 32nd in target share among wideouts. So he's always going to be a top red zone target. He was hyper efficient in that area, though, very efficient on catch rate. I think Tom Brady helps both of those things going forward, but I think there's a little bit more trapdoor to Mike Evans than there seems like, just based on his career to this point.
Yeah, I mean, if he scores 6 touchdowns, you're in trouble. But I'm just betting on that Bucs offense. Like, they got better over the second half of last season, which makes sense when it was a brand new offense with new receivers for Brady. So that passing game to me is one of the safer bets in the NFL.
Do you think avocados are the cure for the Super Bowl hangover?
I hope so, because he was in rough shape. So.
All right. So after DeAndre Swift to Kevin's team, we had TJ Hawkinson go right in the range where he usually goes, and it's a good pick there, I think. Chris Godwin in a sensible range. David Montgomery in round 4. Miles Sanders right after David Montgomery. What are you doing with Miles Sanders right now?
I'm not drafting him in the mid 4th. Late 4th is where I start to consider him. I'm really once like Swift goes, I'm usually not taking running backs for a few rounds. I just don't like what I'm hearing out of Philadelphia with Sanders with the drop issues, and I already thought he was going to lose quite a bit of passing down work. I mean, I still think he is pretty safe as the clear lead ball carrier. Hopefully the Eagles offense takes a step forward, healthier O-line. But it's the pass catching worries me with Sanders enough to push him at least into the back half of round 4.
Yeah, I feel less good about Miles Sanders right now than I did even like a week, 2 weeks ago, because things just aren't in general sounding good out of Philly with the offense. I think that offense is not going to be particularly good, which will hurt scoring chances. Miles Sanders can score from distance, so he doesn't need the goal line work as much as a lot of other running backs. But getting down to that range is obviously going to help the scoring opportunities for any running back. So I'm not sure I trust the offense enough. And like you said, the receiving, you can blame some of it on Carson Wentz maybe last year, but Miles Sanders performed horribly as a receiver last year. It sounds like he's still having issues this year. Boston Scott has been splitting some receiving work with him, like first-team receiving work. Kenneth Gainwell has flashed at times, and, it's tough to bet on Kenneth Gainwell a whole lot as a rookie who didn't play last year. But one thing he has on most running backs is receiving ability, and he has been running some wide receiver type routes from what it sounds like. So if there's a chance that Gainwell also gets into that picture, it's worrisome for Miles Sanders. I agree in that range.
Yeah, and Gainwell got on the field with the starters in that, starters in air quotes because it was Flacco in there, but he did get on the field, with that first team in the second preseason game. So it seems like he might kind of be working his way up the depth chart. I just think whether it's Scott or Gainwell, Sanders is going to lose quite a bit of that pass catching.
Mm-hmm. Plus, I mean, a running quarterback could just not be good for running back targets in general. So if they're splitting fewer targets, then that's no good for anybody. Miles Sanders there. I like David Montgomery. Wary of Miles Sanders going there. Amari Cooper right behind those guys. Then Tyler Lockett. Then Julio Jones. Where are you taking Julio Jones right now, given his, lack of practicing, basically?
Well, we took him at 5:02 last night, and I think that's about as early as I take him at this point. When he's healthy, I think he's going to be a guy, you're fine using as like your wide receiver too. You can't bank on him staying healthy. There's probably going to be games where he's like questionable. You hear he's going to be on a snap count. It's going to kind of be a headache. But like in this format, you're kind of just hoping he's like good to go for those final 3 weeks. And if he is, then, he's probably going to pay off.
Yeah, I really have no idea what to expect specifically from him. Target count, passing volume in general for that team, health. There are so many things I don't know what to expect. So it's like there comes a point where I'm like, I don't love any of the wide receivers still on the board. He is Julio Jones. I got to get some Julio Jones. That's kind of where I'm at on drafting him. But among the guys that went after him in this draft, I think I'm taking DJ Moore ahead of Julio. I think I'm taking Adam Thielen ahead of him. Not really sure on the other guys. What about you among those wideouts that went after Julio in this draft?
Yeah, Moore is the only one I take ahead of him for sure. Thielen, I always feel like I should like Thielen more. We were all over him last year. He hit big. He's really going in about the same spot this year, I think, as he was last year. Of course, now he's kind of clearly the 1B there, but it's still such a concentrated passing game. Like as long as Thielen doesn't like hit the cliff, from an age perspective, and he's only, I think he's 30 or 31. Mm-hmm. So he should be fine. He's never an exciting pick, but I might even lean towards Thielen over Julio right now.
I think there are a lot of people who call Adam Thielen a steal where he's going. I don't agree. I think that's in the range where he should be going because he was very lucky on the touchdown front last year, and that's probably going to regress. And he had a rookie pass him in target share last year. So he's going to get plenty of targets. They were both still top 20 at the position in target share, even with Thielen missing a game last year. Yep. But I think it's appropriate where Adam Thielen's coming off the board.
Yep, I agree.
So we saw the Christian McCaffrey drafter take 2 wideouts at the 2-3 turn, took another 2 wideouts at the 4-5 turn. DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson to that team. What do you think of building your McCaffrey lineup that way?
I mean, we see that quite a bit where the McCaffrey teams, lock up, they're one stud back, and then I think sort of try to have one stud back plus a nice receiver room and then kind of figure out, the RB2 spot. So it's a pretty popular build. I'm cool with it. Looking at the board, like I think that's where I would have gone when you have Mixon and you have CEH off the board. There's kind of no running back to take at that 2-3 turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with the picks that they made there. I think it's certainly a fine way to go. If Mixon had made it to the end of the round, I'd probably take him instead of one of the wideouts, but he didn't, so that's not a decision to make. Right next to that one, we had the Dalvin Cook drafter, then take Joe Mixon in round 2, CeeDee Lamb in round 3, Mark Andrews in round 4, late in round 4. So that's 7 picks after TJ Hawkinson went at 4-11, no, 8 picks after, and then Adam Thielen in round 5. What do you think about having Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook on the same roster?
Yeah, I don't have any numbers to back it up, but we were talking last night about the potential of having Cook and Justin Jefferson, and I kind of don't like it. I guess it's just because Minnesota's offense. I don't see them having the upside to be a top 5 offense. So I don't want to be too heavily invested. I mean, it is concentrated again. Where the ball's going. It's Cook, Jefferson, Thielen, maybe Irv Smith. But I don't hate it. I definitely wouldn't be trying for it. But if this guy had Thielen as his clear top receiver available at that point, I'm not sure I'd pass just because I have Cook.
I agree. I think that Justin Jefferson in round 2 or even early round 3 might be a little bit early to trust that much in Vikings players, because you're asking Dalvin Cook to be a top 3 running back and Justin Jefferson to really be a top 5 wide receiver if you take those guys that early, because you can't have everybody just perform at expectation to win this thing. So I think that's a little early. I think with where Adam Thielen went in round 5 is probably about the earliest I would consider stacking both a pass catcher and a running back from Minnesota specifically. I think there are other teams where I'd be less wary of it, but I agree in general.
Yep.
After Adam Thielen in round 5, we had Mike Davis go off the board. Where are you at on Mike Davis? We haven't talked about him in a little while.
Where are you at? I mean, we haven't seen him. We haven't. There's been nothing. We've heard nothing about that backfield, which I don't know if that's good or bad for Mike Davis.
If I were Arthur Smith, I wouldn't be talking about that backfield either.
I mean, the one thing we can say is Javian Hawkins is buried on that depth chart. He's not going to be a factor. He might not even make the team. It looks like Quadri Olson is at least kind of locked in as the number 2. To me, the big thing with Davis is do they add anything at final roster cuts? Do they make a deal at final roster cuts, a trade? If they don't, I mean, I think 5th round is about right for Davis.
I mean, at this point, I can't argue too strongly with him going in round 5. I'm not going to be the one taking Mike Davis ahead of T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, Brandon Ayuk, the quarterbacks, Travis Etienne. So that's just a backfield I'd rather avoid than say, well, it looks like Mike Davis. I'm going to go ahead and take him.
Yeah, I mean, in general, the running backs to me, the running back dead zone, quote unquote, is round 5 and 6 this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think again, Swift, I think is safe. Montgomery seems pretty safe. So I think there are some backs in rounds 3 and 4, but these round 5, 6 guys. I mean, Davis, Etienne, I still have no idea what to make of. I still think he could be a top 15 guy. I think he could finish 30th among running backs. I just think there's a lot of risk.
I agree. I'm most likely not looking running back here if Miles Sanders doesn't make it to this round. I like David Montgomery. I like Josh Jacobs at cost, and beyond that, I don't like a whole lot in that range. So we'll get to some of the other running backs that went. A couple rookies just went in round 6. But right after Mike Davis, we had Josh Allen as the second quarterback off the board, almost, 2 full rounds behind where Patrick Mahomes went. And then 4 picks after Josh Allen went is Kyler Murray. And then 3 picks after Kyler Murray is Lamar Jackson. And really, I think that is the problem with taking Patrick Mahomes in round 3. He's probably going to be fine for you this season unless he gets hurt. But he's not 2 full rounds better than the next 3 quarterbacks in this class this year.
I mean, if you gave me Mahomes versus the field to lead quarterbacks in fantasy points, I'm taking the field, and I'm pretty confident in it. I think one of Allen, Murray, Jackson, Dak, I think who's still on the board could beat Mahomes in fantasy points. So that again, like you said, that's the issue. It's just paying 2-3 rounds premium over those other guys.
And I think, you look at the Mahomes-Kelsey stack, and, maybe it helps in the playoff weeks, but I also think that going for that stack, looking at that stack is kind of overrating Mahomes versus the rest of the QB field. I think that you can get more value by taking a wide out in that spot and leaving Mahomes. If he gets back to you in round 4, cool, go ahead and take him there. But, if you don't get Mahomes, you can take one of the other quarterbacks and still be strong going forward.
Right. I mean, when you're paying ceiling prices on both those guys, which this guy did, and again, I have no issue with Kelsey. Like, anyone taken in the top 3 are obviously paying a ceiling price. But I mean, what would Kelsey and Mahomes have to do to like really turn a profit on these price tags? They'd have to have even better years than they did last year.
Not to mention, I'm sure that there are a fair number of Kelsey Mahomes stacks in the overall field. I doubt it's all that unique. So after Josh Allen here, we had T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Chase Claypool in the middle of round 5. Then it was Kyler Murray. I mean, all those wide receivers seem appropriately priced at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, Ayuk, I'm getting closer to consensus. I'm still not there yet. I definitely prefer Higgins. I prefer Claypool. Ayuk is more of a 6th rounder for me still, but I get the upside. With a guy who had a stronger season and an offense that should take a step forward this year with Trey Lance.
Yeah, I think he's wide receiver 24 off the board here, so I think it's a fine range. I don't want to be too high on Ayuk either because it's I can't say for sure that he's going to pay off this year. He very well might just finish, wide receiver 24 like he went in the draft this year. And then this particular draft, I mean, Chase Claypool there next, then Kyler Murray, Travis Etienne. You already hit on, I mean, plenty of upside, plenty of downside. The Jacksonville offense doesn't look like something that makes you feel good about betting on it. This team, by the way, that just drafted Travis Etienne, we've got Austin Eckler, Stephon Diggs, Robert Woods, Chris Godwin, Travis Etienne, then Tyler Boyd in round 6. I mean, that's an interesting couple of backs. It's not your typical style of player and running back. Interesting that they put them together. I'm not sure there's any significance to that, though.
Yeah, I mean, upside, you get 150 catches out of those 2 running backs. It's definitely a team. I mean, I'm sure he's going to, be one of the teams kind of pounding running backs later, hoping to hit, one of those, handcuff types or even adding some pass catchers to kind of lay a floor. But Etienne is obviously, he's making a big bet on him. But if Etienne hits, he's in good shape because he has, 2 solid running backs in that case. And then he has, 4 nice wide receivers.
Now we had 3 other picks after that, but then I want to jump ahead to the other rookies that went recently. Javonte Williams at the start of round 6, Trey Sermon 2 picks after Javonte Williams. Are you taking Travis Etienne ahead of those 2 right now? I guess 1, if you're deciding among them, do you prefer Etienne still? And 2, if all 3 of those guys are on the board, are you taking Etienne right there at 5'10", or I'm sorry, 5'09"? Yeah. Or are you just leaving him there, taking a wide out, and then seeing what gets back in round 6?
I don't know what to say about Etienne anymore. I've gone back and forth so many times.
He's a scary player to be either 2 in or 2 out on.
Well, he's to the point for me personally, and this isn't going to help other people, but I've taken enough of him where I feel like I have my exposure. So at this point, I'm kind of just ignoring him unless he drops. Like if I can get him in the back half of round 6. I'll take a shot. I still think he's going to play a big role in the passing game and catch, at least 40 balls this year. But I have no idea what he's going to do on the ground. I do still like him over Sermon and Williams, though, just because I don't think Sermon and Williams are going to do a ton in their respective passing games.
Yeah. I don't have strong feelings about any of those guys over the others. I do think that if I put aside how much Travis Etienne I have, I think I would pass on him there and see if Trey Sermon or Javonte Williams makes it back to me in round 6, knowing that I'm okay if I just miss out on all 3 of those guys. But yeah, Travis Etienne, if he catches 40 balls, he's probably going to need to carry 200 times if he's going to be, a league-winning type of player.
Well, Jacksonville's second preseason game kicks off in 20 minutes. So, ask me again in 2 hours and maybe I can tell you, with a bit more, conviction how I feel about Travis Etienne.
Let's hope that time span will include Travis Etienne's first touches and he doesn't go Michael Carter and wait until the second half.
Yes, please.
All right, so in between those rookie picks, we had Jerry Jeudy go at 5'10". We had Lamar Jackson go to Kevin's team at 5'11", and then Jamar Chase closed out round 5. What do you think about our boys' picks so far?
Yeah, so I would guess that he was eyeing Jerry Jeudy. Maybe not. I mean, maybe he would have taken Lamar anyways. I don't know. I do like the Lamar pick. Again, to get him as quarterback 4. To me, like with Dak's, until we see like Dak full go, he's like a tier beneath the Allen, Murray, Lamar guy. So to me, like Kevin got the final quarterback in that tier. And in especially in lineup setting leagues, I do like getting the stud quarterback even more so than in best ball. It's just like I said and forget it. Yeah. And he has that now at tight end and at quarterback. Now he's going to have to find depth at the other positions because he spent 2 of his first 5 picks on the onesie spots, but he's going to be strong at the onesie spot. So I like the Lamar pick, and then the Odell Beckham pick is fine too. I think that's where I would have gone there at wideout.
Yeah, I mean, he'll probably, I'm sure, take at the very least one more tight end and probably two more for this tight end premium format. But he could go the rest of this draft and not take another quarterback. The Ravens don't have a bye until week 8, I believe it is. So you're going to be starting Lamar Jackson almost definitely every one of those weeks up until that point. So there's no need to take a second quarterback. So that's one spot that you can build depth wherever you want. Otherwise we got Saquon Barkley, as we mentioned, DeAndre Swift in round 4. There's Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, the top 2 wideouts. There's a mix of upside and some downside risk here, which I guess is really kind of what you want to do with a tournament team. I mean, the upside is more important than the downside, because if everybody just kind of does what you expect, you're not winning it. So what you want is guys that, have that ceiling, even if the floor creaks when they're walking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's nice to win your league. I think if you win your FFPC, 12-team league, you almost double your money. So that's nice. But again, this is kind of structured as like a DFS tournament where, the prize pool is heavily weighted to the top. So you really want to, try to, finish in the top 10 or, ideally win the whole thing.
No, Jared. High stakes was first. DFS tournaments are built to match these.
That is true.
So around the turn, Jamar Chase, Javonte Williams, Odell Beckham to Kevin's team, Trey Sermon next, then Tyler Boyd. We already mentioned Logan Thomas keeps showing up early. He's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th tight end off the board here. That's before the middle of round 6. What do you think about Logan Thomas right there?
I'm trying to see if that. I guess we have his, and I'm looking at the wrong. I'm trying to see where his FFPC ADP is, because I feel like he might be the tight end 7 now that we've gotten into these main event drafts, and you have what we think are sharper drafters. Yeah, he is tight end 7, and we have his ADP at 6'4", and yet we have Noah Fant as tight end 8 at 7'2". So there's even a gap between Thomas and the rest of the field behind him. I mean, as people have pointed out, as the pro Thomas people have pointed out, like his usage last year was awesome. Not just even targets, snaps and routes run. It was right up there at the top of the league, and that's kind of continued into the preseason. I think it probably will continue, although we haven't seen Curtis Samuel out there. We haven't seen Washington's full wide receiver core. I think Thomas is going to be out there running routes. I still think his targets are coming down, with Samuel there, with Gibson taking on more in the passing game. So to me, he's in the tier with Noah Fant, with Tyler Higbee. I think I still have Goddard in that tier, although he's slipping. I prefer Fant for sure, and I think I still prefer Higbee over Logan Thomas.
If everything had gone exactly the same last season and Logan Thomas were a 25-year-old tight end who, had played tight end in college and arrived as a tight end, I think he would be an exciting player right now. But is he 30 yet, or he's going to be 30 soon? I mean, my concern is that he's Terrell Pryor, really. I mean, maybe he continues to ascend this year, but he's kind of getting up there for being an ascending player. So I don't know. I guess I'm not willing to follow him up. I can't argue strongly against the people that are drafting him where he's going right now, but I don't think I'm going to reach a point where I'm like, yeah, okay, I like Logan Thomas there.
Yeah, he turned 30 in July. The pro Thomas people will tell you that like he still could be on the ascent just because he hasn't played the position for very long, which might be the case. I don't know. I just when I watched him last year, and when I look at some of the underlying metrics, like he wasn't great. He was a product of volume. And again, if you think that volume's coming down, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's my issue. So we'll see. Maybe he's ascending. Maybe he's the tight end version of Fred Jackson. Although Fred Jackson was a running back coming into the league, he just didn't get the ball for a while. So we'll see. It'll be more interesting to watch Logan Thomas now than I was expecting it to be at the beginning of draft season.
Yep, for sure.
After Logan Thomas in this draft, Russell Wilson came off the board several more spots ahead of Dak Prescott, 5 spots ahead of Dak Prescott to be exact. So even though we've seen Dak Prescott throw the ball now, we've heard Jerry Jones say that if they were starting the season right now, Dak Prescott would be behind center. Still some apprehension on him. I mean, I think there's a chance that this apprehension could really pay off for Dak Prescott drafters. And in this particular case, the Dak drafter had CeeDee Lamb in round 3.
Yeah, I would guess that team was, praying that Dak was going to make it back to him, especially, after Wilson went off the board. Dak's kind of the last, I think, of that tier. So yeah, I like what team 2 is doing. They got that Cook mix and start, which we did last night, and it was so beautiful. So yeah, I think that's a nice team there at the 2 spot.
Behind Russell Wilson, we had Kareem Hunt, Myles Gaskin, and Raheem Mostert go in round 6. And I'm going to check the ADP on Raheem Mostert, but Kareem Hunt's a guy that I just don't want, where you have to draft him. I'll just pass and take another position if I don't like a running back. And Myles Gaskin, somebody that I would have felt better about a couple weeks ago, but the usage through the first 2 preseason games has me thinking that's just going to be a committee in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, it was better in week 2, obviously. Gaskin started. Mm-hmm. He led the running backs in first team snaps, but it was him and Ahmed basically, and it was close to 50-50. And they both looked good. To me, Gaskin and Ahmed are clearly the best 2 backs in Miami. And then Malcolm Brown's just kind of, if you want to use him in short yardage, fine. But so yeah, I mean, I like Gaskin less than I did 3 weeks ago, but more than I did a week and a half ago at this point. The one running back I like over him for sure is Chase Edmonds. Because I do think it's going to be a split carry wise in Arizona, but I think Evans is going to do most of the pass catching stuff. That's an offense I still believe in. So Edmonds over Gaskin for me.
Yeah, to me the 5, 6, 7 is more of an RB dead zone than 3, 4 are this year. And you just look at the players that went in the 2 rounds in this particular draft. If you're listening to this afterward, you can check the YouTube stream to see all the guys who went in that range. But that's the range where I don't want to be drafting running backs more so than round 4 this year, where I can get guys that I like. The Dolphins' usage, I think, were the way that the second game went and the fact that Myles Gaskin was playing late and behind the others in the first game means that we now have to watch and see what happens in the third, because maybe game 2 was a good thing, but maybe it's like, okay, we're going to play all these guys in all these different situations because they're just all going to be mixed together heading into the season, and we're going to annoy you if you draft any of them and hope to start them at any point.
I mean, Brian Flores said after that first game that it's going to be a committee. Like, he basically came right out and said they want to use all 3 of those guys. So expect that to be the case. Again, I do think Gaskin is, I think he's the best player in that backfield, and I also think he is a good bet to handle most of the pass catching stuff. I mean, Ahmed can do that too. Brown, I guess, is capable, but I do think Gaskin is still going to get most of the targets in that backfield.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so after the way they used him last year, and he seemed to respond to it. We always have to remind ourselves, though, that a year ago, we weren't talking about Myles Gaskin at all. We were like, oh, they got Matt Breida, they got Jordan Howard. Right. It's going to be those guys. We'll see where the ball goes.
Yep.
Raheem Mostert followed them here. That is a little bit earlier than he goes. He's been at 703 in main event ADP, so he's at, 609 here. So not far from it. Are you drafting Raheem Mostert at this stage?
I don't think I've drafted him a single time. I just have. I mean, I think Sermon's going to be the lead guy, and I think Lance is going to take a lot of carries. I don't know. You sit down and do projections, and it's kind of hard to find enough work for Mostert, barring a Sermon injury.
Yeah. So, and I think because Raheem Mostert comes in with some knee history and is older than Trey Sermon, for me, Raheem Mostert is somebody that I like having some of in best ball, because it's a backfield that we want any pieces of, because running backs are going to score points unless things go horribly wrong for the 49ers. I kind of agree. In lineup setting, I think that if anybody emerges as the clear leader at this point, or at some point this season, it's going to be Trey Sermon. So that's the guy I want to take, rather than a guy that I think is probably going to split work with Trey Sermon for longer. I want that ultimate ceiling rather than, what might be there early on. Now, the one thing we haven't seen yet, and we can't know until the season starts, is whether sitting Mostert is something about resting a veteran, or if it's like, we know what Mostert can do. He's going to get more carries than anybody else in the backfield once the regular season comes. So we're just going to rest him for now, and then we'll unleash him in week 1.
I think it's probably we know Mostert has trouble staying healthy, so we don't want to throw him out there in the preseason.
Just don't talk about his knee brace. You're going to piss him off. Yeah. Kenny Golladay followed Raheem Mostert off the board here. Then it was the Dak Prescott pick we mentioned, a 5th straight wideout for the Christian McCaffrey team before he got his second running back. And I say he, we don't have the names posted, so I don't know who it is. But Christian McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and then Chase Edmonds in round 7. And that's kind of a good example of what you can find by waiting a while, loading up on wideouts, and then taking a second running back. Because obviously Chase Edmonds doesn't have the high ceiling of plenty of other guys. Even some other guys might still be on the board, but it's somebody you know is going to be on the field every week. He's going to catch a decent number of passes. You're probably going to get a couple other guys that might be able to cycle in as your second running back. It's what you can do if you start the thing off with McCaffrey.
Yeah, I like Edmonds in that range regardless. I like him especially, for this build. I think, this team now, obviously, if McCaffrey's healthy and does what we expect, he's going to have the best player in fantasy. He's going to be stronger than most teams at wide receiver. And then, like you said, Edmonds, I think, is a guy, like, worst case, he's going to lay a floor of, 10 carries and, a handful of targets every game. And then if Connor gets hurt again or if Connor's just out of gas, then, Edmonds could turn into, a top 20 running back. And then this team's going to be really strong.
Yeah, and he's RB29 here, so it's not a heavy investment in the slightest bit. So, like the build of the McCaffrey team here. In the second spot, we had Antonio Brown go next after Chase Edmonds, then Noah Fant as the 8th tight end off the board. Like Jared mentioned, that's right around ADP. I like Noah Fant this year. I'm not taking Logan Thomas ahead of Noah Fant.
No, I like Fant too. I don't like him for this team who, took Kelsey.
That's true.
3, spend a third rounder on a quarterback. And in the FFPC, you can take 2 tight ends early because you can flex one of them. But I don't know. I just think this guy's leaving himself too thin at running back and wide receiver by spending, those 2 early picks at tight end.
Yeah, and I'm not sure Noah Fant's going to be a high enough volume receiver to merit that kind of weekly starter status. So I agree that starting out with Kelsey, I would probably wait a little bit longer on tight end, take a chance on, somebody more in the Evan Engram range.
Agreed. Yep.
Darrell Henderson, by the way, the injury was a thumb, and Sean McVay said he's not sure. He got his thumb, don't have any updates on that. So we'll see how serious it is. I would think that this far ahead of the season, a thumb shouldn't be something that affects Darrell Henderson in the regular season, but obviously we're going to have to watch and see what the specific diagnosis is.
Yeah, we'll see. And at this point, we have no idea who the number 2 back is there. Jake Funk started ahead of Xavier Jones in the second preseason game. And Funk's been better than Jones through the first 2 preseason games. I still think they're going to add someone who will end up being the number 2.
Yeah, I would say behind Darrell Henderson, it's all looks like number 2. Cortland Sutton followed Noah Fant off the board here. Then it was Robbie Anderson. For me, it's Robbie Anderson over Cortland Sutton. And honestly, it's not even taking that much thought for me to make that move.
Yeah, it still is for me. I tweeted that, Terrace Marshall looks so good in the preseason. I'm a bit worried he's going to steal some target share. But I mean, Curtis Samuel saw, 98 targets last year. And I know McCaffrey was out. He's going to pick up some. But I mean, there's room for Marshall to get 80, 90 targets and for Anderson to, still be around the range he was last season.
And I mean, if volume is the question there, then Denver, we've got Judy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, and KJ Hamler is having a good preseason. So there are a lot of guys there.
Yeah. Denver's passing game, though, I know it's a preseason. I know it's only 2 games, but Bridgewater and Locke have looked really good. And we know those weapons are awesome. So if either or both quarterbacks can be competent, that's going to be a good passing game.
Yeah, within the past week, I think, really since we got into preseason games, it's gone from I don't really care who wins that QB spot because whoever is not going to be that awesome to I want to bet on the right Broncos quarterback late in a draft because that guy could be good as a week-to-week fill-in.
I agree, and I still haven't drafted either of them. I think on underdog, 18-round drafts, you can't afford to take one. I don't think it's just too risky if you pick the wrong one, or even if a guy only starts 8 games or whatever. I agree. I think whoever gets the job, and most of the Denver media that I've read expected to be Bridgewater. Which is kind of surprising because I think Locke was kind of in the lead until this last preseason game. And I think Teddy was just so good, and he was impressive. I just watched that game this afternoon. And I still think Teddy makes those pass catchers safer because I still don't totally trust Drew Lock. I think Lock maybe brings the higher ceiling, but like I said, either way, I think both guys have looked good. So I think those this Broncos pass catchers are in pretty good shape right now.
Yeah, I just hope that we get word from Vic Fangio this week so that we know heading into next weekend's drafts and we don't have to guess going forward. Yeah. I would think that they would announce it before the 3rd preseason game, or at the very least telegraph it with whoever opens that game behind center.
That's what I was going to say. I think whoever starts that 3rd game, if it's not announced, we can kind of assume it's going to be that guy.
If you are doing like a 2 QB or super flex draft, though, I think that you can start with 2 early guys and then wait. And then, you can decide based on what's there. You can take somebody like Zach Wilson or Sam Darnold or whatever. But I think that you can even wait at this point and take both Broncos late. If it's a deep enough draft, then you can, use those roster spots that way.
Yeah, yeah, we saw. I think a couple teams did that in the Draft Sharks Invitational drafts.
Yeah, I think I ended up doing it, but I forget at this point. There have been so many
Genius,
drafts since then.
genius.
Devontae Smith followed Robbie Anderson off the board here ahead of Laviska Shenault, James Robinson in between them. Jared, how are you feeling about Laviska Shenault right now? He went round 7 in this one, 7:08, I believe.
Yeah, I still love the player. I've mentioned that I'm just uneasy about the Jags offense in general because of the coaching staff. It kind of seems like they don't know what they're doing. We had Dwayne McFarland on the pod last week, and he talked about that Visca's only playing in 3 wide receiver sets, which isn't ideal. But I just do still think Jacksonville is going to be a team that's in 3 wide receiver sets like 70-75% of the time. So I think Visca will be on the field enough. I don't know. To me, Marvin Jones is still the best value in that wide receiver core. Visca maybe has the higher ceiling just because a young guy and still on the ascent. I don't know. 7th round is about right for Shenault to me.
Yeah, to me, he's gone from somebody that I'm looking for as it gets to like round 8 to somebody that I'll shrug and take where he comes up making sense. Because I think the biggest issue, again, like I said, with ETN is that just that whole Jacksonville situation. I don't want to be over invested in anything there.
Yep, totally.
After him, Damian Harris. And honestly, that's a guy that I feel a little bit better now than I did before. And I think it's a solid addition to the Travis Etienne roster here. I don't think either of those guys is a lock to deliver for you, but it looks like Damian Harris is going to still be their lead back. Although that's, coming during a preseason where they have plenty of backfield buzz among multiple players.
Yeah, I mean, Stevenson's been the star of the preseason, right? Their running back coach still was like talking him down this week after that second preseason game. I don't know. I think they don't want to use him this year. Maybe he's going to force them to if he keeps playing like this. But Harris is not a guy I've been taking. I think even best case, like he's going to do nothing in the passing game. And we've talked about if it's Cam Newton under center, like he's going to steal so many of those goal line carries. You're going to get like 15 carries between the 20s for Damian Harris and nothing in the passing game. So I don't really see the upside on him.
Although, did Cam Newton have his Tyrod Taylor moment this week where he failed to follow the rules on COVID? And it didn't fail to follow, but wasn't aware of the rules on the COVID protocols. And now he's going to miss 5 days of practice. And Mac Jones was marching in his vice principal suit, like tickled to get those first team reps, I'm sure. It's going to be interesting to see if anything changes with 5 days of Mac Jones and no Cam Newton at practice.
That's another team, and maybe not so much the first preseason game, but I thought Newton and Jones looked really good in the second preseason game. Newton especially looked like, as a passer, better than I think he looked at all last year. So that's good news for the pass catchers. Yeah, well, we'll see. Shocking that the Patriots didn't know that rule. We think of them as like the team that knows every intricacy of the rule book, and they didn't know that. So.
Yeah, it's probably good news for Cam Newton how he looked. I'm sure it's also bad news for a Philly secondary that has been bad for a while.
Yeah, true.
I think teams are going to be able to pass against the Eagles. Dallas Goedert, speaking of Eagles, followed Damian Harris off the board here. Deebo Samuel was the 7th round pick for Kevin, who then took Michael Gallup in round 8. So Kevin's team so far: Darren Waller, Saquon Barkley, Mike Evans, DeAndre Swift, Lamar Jackson, then 3 straight wideouts: Odell Beckham, Deebo Samuel, Michael Gallup. What do you think of the way Kevin's drafting so far?
Yeah, it's solid. I mean, wide receivers flew off the board. I counted them up. Deebo was wide receiver 37. And then he took Gallup at wide receiver 39. So we had 38 wide receivers in the first, 7 rounds. I'm trying to see, usually there's 37. So I guess it's kind of normal as far as wide receivers coming off the board. He's not strong at wide receiver, but I think he's fine. He just adds Curtis Samuel there as a fifth. So I think, he has enough guys where he's going to get by at that position.
Yeah, you can definitely cycle him through and get 2 good starters. And if both Mike Evans and Odell Beckham hit their ceilings, then you're set in the top 2 starting spots at least, and you're just looking to fill the flex spot. You mentioned he got Curtis Samuel, also came back in round 10 now with Leonard Fournette as his 3rd running back. Are we feeling any differently about Leonard Fournette after all of the 3rd down work that Gio Bernard has gotten so far?
Yeah, he's moved down our rankings a bit, 4 or 5 spots. He's still an upside play. Like I took him a lot in best ball, which I like because he's just in there. I think he's going to have spike weeks in that offense. Lineup setting, I think it's going to be tough. Without like a Ronald Jones injury. If he's splitting early down work and losing passing down stuff, it might be tough to ever feel comfortable starting him. But it's a 10th round, And again, in this format, I think you want to be taking upside shots. And I do still think just because the offense he plays in, Fournette has a pretty high ceiling.
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point if I would take Leonard Fournette over Jamal Williams. I think they're in the same range, and I think you can easily make the argument either way on them. For me right now, Fournette's a guy that when he first comes up at the top of my draft war room, I'm like, I'm not taking him yet because there are like 4 running backs here, and I'd be fine with any of them, and we'll see who makes it back to me. And if I miss out on all 4 of them, I'll also be okay with the next group. So I wait sometimes 2 turns, and then the next turn, it's like, all right, fine. It's time to go ahead and add Fournette because there is that upside. He's like the kind of handcuff that I'm more interested in than the straight handcuff because he's going to be playing somewhat. They didn't re-sign him to be the 3rd running back while Ronald Jones is handling the first 2 downs and Gio's handling 3rd downs. So he's going to be playing. And then if Jones goes down, there's immediate upside to Fournette. So I'm fine with him where he's going. I agree with that. Let's look at the team right next to Kevin. Started with the pair of running backs, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, then Cooper Kupp, J.K. Dobbins, Jamar Chase, Javonte Williams, Tyler Higbee, Jalen Waddle, Aaron Rodgers, Darnell Mooney. That's a lot of rookies mixed in on that team.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, not my favorite team, to be honest. The Javonte Williams pick, a bit early for me, even just in a vacuum. And then when you already have those 3 running backs, I don't like going running back there. And I don't know, like Waddle felt a bit early to me. Yeah, not my favorite team.
Yeah, I think that if you start with Jonathan Taylor and Najee Harris, you're expecting those 2 guys to really hit for you. So I would have skipped the Dobbins pick specifically and looked wide receiver there. I'm not big on Jamar Chase. So, you could quibble over the individual picks, but I agree. I think that there could be a different way to go about this. It might yield a little bit more upside in general too. I don't think you want to rely on that many rookies unless you're taking guys later in the draft. That's where you take rookies, maybe add, 2 or 3 total, but there's a threshold, but once you get past that, it's pretty risky.
Yeah, I was curious to see where Chase was going to go. I think we kind of skipped over him, but yeah, he didn't get any discount tonight. That's kind of, I guess you see him go in the middle of the 4th in some of these drafts, but you also see him get well into the 5th. So no ADP drop, at least in this draft for Chase.
Yeah, he was at least after Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool, Brandon Ayuk. So I'm still probably not the Chase drafter there. I don't think I'm taking him ahead of – I think I'm honestly taking Tyler Boyd ahead of him if I'm deciding between those guys because I think that the floor is clearly there with Boyd, and I'm just not sure that the ceiling for Chase this season goes that much higher than it does for Boyd.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'd lean Chase just in this format again when you're looking for upside, and like especially late in the year. I think that's when we kind of see rookies really start to hit their strides. I think Chase kind of works for this format, but yeah, and like a just a 12-team league, full PPR, I'd have no issue taking Boyd over Chase.
Mm-hmm. All right, so back into round 8, we had Tyler Higbee go at the end of round 7. He's the 10th tight end off the board, so that's a solid spot. Are you feeling? Have we heard anything about Higbee's usage or anything else? Because as far as I know, the only tight end that's in camp for the Rams is Jacob Harris.
Yeah, well, the Rams haven't played any starters in the preseason, which is, I think, kind of McVay's MO. I'm not concerned about Harris. Like, he's probably gonna be the number 2 tight end. He'll be on the field some, but I like Higbee a lot at tight end 10. I like him over Goddard at this point. As long as Ertz is in Philly, I'm taking Higbee over Goddard there.
Yeah, I think that Jacob Harris this season is more likely to be Zach Sudfeld than he is to be Gerald Everett. And if anybody doesn't remember Zach Sudfeld, that's not the guy who used to play quarterback for the Eagles, but it's the guy who was the buzzy summer tight end for the Jets and then did absolutely nothing once the regular season rolled around. So, I mean, Jacob Harris has some flashy highlights. He's a fast guy. Maybe he makes an impact this season, but he's also somebody who's moving from wide out to tight end for the Rams, and he's a later round rookie. So odds are against him making a big contribution this year. I think that helps Tyler Higbee's outlook.
Yeah, good dynasty stash, but I don't think you can count on Harris to do anything significant this season.
After Higbee, we got Jalen Waddle, Michael Gallup, Mecole Hardman. What are you doing with Mecole Hardman right now?
I'm kind of back off. I think I mentioned that on last night's podcast. I was off the first 2 years. Was kind of back on, mildly, I guess, this spring. He's still. It still looks like he's their 3rd wideout. It's been. Tyreek Hill, when he's played, he didn't play in this last one, but it's been Hill and Robinson as the top 2. And then, Hardman's a 3 and they run a ton of 3 wide receivers. He's going to be on the field. I don't know. He still doesn't look like he ran that route in that second preseason game where you could see Mahomes telling me wanting him to do something else, when it was near the end zone or at the goal line. So I think Hardman still isn't all the way there yet. Especially in lineup setting leagues, I just think he might still be a tough guy to count on in your lineup every week.
Yeah, I liked him early in draft season because he was going later, but now more people are getting excited about him and looking around and seeing that Sammy Watkins left and that it's just Demarcus Robinson and some other guys that most people don't know and getting excited again. But for the reasons that you just stated, I think it's time to back off this particular draft. So, I mean, I just looked at ADP and he's going ahead of guys like Elijah Moore, Darnell Mooney, Jarvis Landry. I'll take all those guys ahead of Mecole Hardman. And in this specific draft, he went ahead of Michael Pittman, Brandon Cooks, Mike Williams, as well as the guys in the next round. I'm taking all three of those guys before Mecole Hardman comes off the board for my team.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like just looking at this board, he belongs with like Mooney, Landry, Ruggs, like those. So he's like a 10th rounder to me, just looking at this board.
Yes, I agree with that, and you should expect him to go by the end of round 9 at this point. So it's not going to be time for me to draft Mecole Hardman in general at this point.
Yep.
Irv Smith after Mecole Hardman in this one. He was the 11th tight end. Are you feeling the same way about Irv Smith as you have been all offseason?
I am, yeah. I just wrote up he had encouraging usage in their second preseason game. Tyler Conklin was out, so I don't know how much to take away from it. But Irv played every snap with Kirk Cousins. He ran a route. I think it was 8 of 10 or 8 of 11 dropbacks. So he to me, he's well below Fant, Higbee. Still Goddard, I think, for me, but it's closer now. But Irv's kind of the next guy for me after Higbee and Fant are off the board.
Yeah, I think Irv Smith is closer to Goddard now for me than he was a little bit ago because Goddard's in a worrisome situation. I mean, it's not going to be a high efficiency offense anyway, so he's going to need targets. And Zach Ertz is still there, blonde hair and all. I mean, he's making plays. He's heavily involved. So even if the wideouts don't live up to their first round hype, it might be a little bit harder to find targets than we might have thought with Dallas Goedert earlier in draft season.
Yep, agreed.
Michael Pittman after Irv Smith here, then A.J. Dillon, Michael Carter. I think sensible range for those guys. Robert Tonyan after Irv Smith. I believe that's a 12th tight end off the board. That's, I think, the beginning of where it's fine for him. We've seen him creep into more like the top 10 recently. I think if he's 12th or below, you can make a case for it because even though we know the touchdown efficiency and the catch rate are almost definitely coming down from last year, he could also see more targets.
Yeah, there's been some good buzz on Tonyan. Just that he's kind of taken another step forward this offseason. So, and I mean, I like MVS, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, what we've heard coming out of him from camp, but there's still room for Tonyan to even be the number 2 target in that passing game behind Devontae Adams.
And obviously, tight end 12 is already builds in some of that slide down from after he finished tight end 3 last year. So Fine spot for him. Brandon Cooks next. Still going too late, but that's just going to be the way it is all offseason because they don't have quarterbacks. Melvin Gordon followed Brandon Cooks. Jared, are you taking Melvin Gordon? Talked about Javonte Williams going too early for you here. Is Melvin Gordon somebody that you're at all interested in, or are you just avoiding the Denver backfield?
I'm pretty much avoiding it. Again, the offense has looked good. That would obviously help the running backs if the offense does ascend. We haven't seen Gordon yet in the preseason. I think you wrote the Shark Bite. He's supposed to play in the 3rd preseason game, right?
I think so.
Yes. Someone it might have been Kevin. It wasn't me.
I have to remember at this point.
Yeah. So it'll be nice to see how they use Gordon and Williams. So Williams so far, he started both games, but he's been rotating with Royce Freeman, and Freeman's been playing most of the passing downs. So I think Gordon's just going to kind of step into that role. I think it's going to open the season as a committee, and I think Gordon's going to be more of the pass catching back. So Gordon might even be the better fantasy bet early on. I think Williams surpasses him at some point. So yeah, I don't see much of a ceiling with Gordon without Javonte Williams' injury.
I agree. I mean, I took Melvin Gordon in an auction the other night for $3 just because pretty much everything else was gone. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, there's upside, especially if Javonte Williams goes down. Royce Freeman's kind of interesting because the Mike Boone injury has given him opportunity. And it kind of makes you wonder why Royce Freeman is not an Atlanta Falcon yet and whether he might be before we get to September, or at least before we get to week 1.
It's funny you say that because I was watching that Broncos game and just thinking to myself, like, Royce Freeman's good. I mean, he's not special, but he's a good NFL running back. He could definitely contribute on a lot of teams.
Yeah, whatever a good NFL running back is, what a
Yeah,
position
exactly.
doesn't matter.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, Royce Freeman's the kind of guy that if you're at the end of a long draft and you're like, I don't like any of these running backs, stash a guy like that and see if he does get traded to a team, because you could certainly see it happening after what Denver did to their backfield this offseason. They could use a draft pick, and there are other teams, Atlanta, that could use running back help. So we'll see. Speaking of running back, Zach Moss went to the Chase Edmonds team. I like it in round 8. You know, Zach Moss, maybe he just splits with Devin Singletary and he doesn't become a starter, but there's at least the upside if he becomes the number 1 running back for that Bills team at any point, or even the slight leader in the backfield, even if there's not a true number 1. Justin Herbert, the next pick for that one, then Kenyon Drake and Evan Ingram as the first tight end for that team in round 11. What do you think about the McCaffrey team at this point?
And so he kind of did what we thought he would, taking a few running backs after waiting until round 7 for his second. Moss at the end of the 8th is fine. Singletary just went in, the back half of round 11. What we've seen over the past couple of weeks, Singletary looks good, and Moss looked fine, I think, in that second preseason game. But Singletary played, the first 10 or so snaps of that game. It kind of looked like the clear lead guy. I still think it's going to be a committee, but I'm kind of less confident in Moss leading that committee now than I was, 2 weeks ago. So just comparing those two, I'd rather take Singletary in the 11th. Herbert stands out as a big value. Again, looking back at Mahomes, like Mahomes will outscore Herbert very likely, but I'd much rather have Herbert in round 9 than Mahomes in round 3.
And Justin Herbert went 2+ rounds after Dak Prescott, who was the 6th quarterback off the board. Justin Herbert is the 7th quarterback in this one. So 2+ rounds gap between those guys. I agree. That's good value on Justin Herbert. So it's like the league is helping out the McCaffrey drafter here, even beyond just getting McCaffrey with that top pick. To your point on the Bills running back, I agree that it's totally reasonable to lean toward Devin Singletary at this point. I wouldn't say I'm confident in anybody in that backfield. And I think the only reason to draft either of them really is like maybe this guy could wind up with the most touches, especially near the goal line, on a team that should be among the top scoring offenses in the league.
Yeah, it's still a backfield to avoid for me in general. Even with Singletary, they do not use him near the goal line. It's Zach Moss and Josh Allen, so it's the upside in Singletary, even if he is the lead back, is pretty limited.
Right, and that use near the goal line is what has me leaning toward Moss, but certainly not a place to bet too heavily on anybody. Going back to round 9, following that Justin Herbert pick, we had Elijah Moore come off the board, then DJ Chark, Michael Thomas. I think, say what you want about Elijah Moore, DJ Chark, those are fine spots for them. Is this the appropriate spot for Michael Thomas?
I'm just looking like beyond him. Corey Davis, I'm taking ahead of him at wide receiver. I'm probably taking Darnell Mooney ahead of Thomas. Other than that, I mean, it's okay. I think Thomas is better in a lineup setting league, because to me in best ball, to just be taking 0 after 0 after 0 from this guy that you took in the 9th round, it hurts. Here, at least you can just park him on your bench, and then hopefully he's Michael Thomas when he comes back, and then hopefully you kind of survive the first month or so without him, and then he comes back, and then you're rolling.
My one thing about Michael Thomas here, I think in general, it's a fine range. I probably wouldn't be the drafter on him because, like you said, there are a couple other wideouts still on the board that I would take ahead of Michael Thomas right now. But my one criticism here is I would like to have something more stable ahead of him at wide receiver. The drafter for Michael Thomas here has Julio, has Cortland Sutton, has Brandon Cooks, then Michael Thomas is the 4th, and then Henry Ruggs is the 5th. So, I mean, maybe Julio is Julio this year. Maybe Cortland Sutton's knee is all the way back, and maybe Brandon Cooks gets 140+ targets, and maybe you're in great shape ahead of Michael Thomas, but maybe not on any of those 3 guys.
Yeah, that's a great point. At least Thomas is his 4th, which I think is kind of, I'd want him at least as my 4th, maybe as my 5th, but yeah, you're right in the 3 receivers, especially Julio and Sutton coming off the ACL, they're riskier to begin with. So Thomas doesn't really fit this build too well.
James Conner next off the board. And Jared, do you think that you would have taken James Conner instead of Zach Moss to go with Chase Edmonds on the same team, or would you not want both of those Arizona running backs on the same roster? The James Conner drafter didn't take Chase Edmonds, but this was back at the turn where we had Zach Moss go to the McCaffrey team.
That's a good question. I mean, straight up at this point, I actually prefer Conner over Moss. Yeah, I guess I would have taken Connor there and had both Cardinals backs. And again, I think you're really hoping one of them goes down, and you have kind of a 3-down back. But to me again, Edmonds is going to be someone you can kind of start as like a lower end RB2 to begin with, just because of the pass catching, and then Connor would kind of be a semi handcuff, but also maybe a standalone option. At least during the bye weeks.
Right. Normally, we don't want to handcuff a backup to a starter, but that's not this situation. This is a split backfield. I think when it gets to bye weeks or you have somebody else go down, those two are guys that you could start in the same backfield in a given week. I don't think you want that to be a regular starting duo, but it's a duo that you could start together. Whereas, say, Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott is not one that you're going to do that with.
Yep.
After James Conner in round 9, we had Tom Brady follow Justin Herbert in the same round, right in the middle of round 9. So that team's got Tyreek Hill, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk, Kareem Hunt, Devontae Smith, Michael Carter, Tom Brady, then followed with Jonnu Smith, Terrace Marshall in round 11. We can get to him in a few. And Damian Williams, the latest pick. Might be a little early for him, but we'll see about that. Good value for Tom Brady. I mean, it's tough to love the value when we got Justin Herbert going earlier in the same round, but that's right where Tom Brady should be going.
Yep, and there's been there's been four quarterbacks come off the board in the following round and a half or whatever. So you started a bit of a run. I think that's where Brady should be going. I think Herbert to me just went like a round later than he should be going.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki followed Tom Brady off the board, then Corey Davis, Rondale Moore, Marquise Brown, Curtis Samuel, Aaron Rodgers at the end of round 9. Corey Davis, you talked about him some lately as an underrated guy, and I've come around on it, especially after counting up the targets for Zach Wilson over the first 2 games. And granted, there's been no Elijah Moore on the field, but Corey Davis is almost at 50% target share for the Jets so far.
Yeah, it's some ridiculous stat. He's seen like 7 targets on like 20 pass routes or something. I mean, it's not sustainable, like you said. Moore hasn't been on the field. Davis was a guy I've thought he was undervalued this whole offseason. I thankfully have quite a few best ball shares, and his ADP is going to climb now, I think, into the range where it should. I think he went at a fair price here. It's kind of where he should have been going all along. I mean, he was good last year, from a raw production and even efficiency standpoint. The Jets gave him a pretty big contract. So I think it's going to be Davis and Moore as the clear top 2 guys in that passing game. And Zach Wilson looks good. It looks like that passing game should at least be solid right out of the gate.
I like to talk about how Elijah Moore could lead that team in targets, but I mean, if we're talking about likely, I think we have to figure that it's more likely that Corey Davis leads that team in targets, given that he's a veteran, that they paid him a ton of money this offseason.
Yeah, man, I hope Moore gets back on the field soon. I'm starting to get a little nervous.
It would be nice if we get the tandem, especially in the 3rd preseason game, to read it. Rondale Moore after Corey Davis in round 9. Is this where he should be going?
And I don't think I've even taken him in round 9. I think he's been more of like a 10-11 guy for me. But you kind of have to expect his ADP to climb. He's been just so busy in the preseason. And I'm like Kevin took Curtis Samuel. I still prefer Samuel over Moore. I think I still prefer Mooney over Moore. But I guess that's kind of it at wide receiver. So maybe it's at early.
So not Marquise Brown ahead of Rondale Moore?
I'd rather have Moore.
I'd rather have a guy who could be Baltimore's number 1 wideout than a guy who's going to be Arizona's 3rd.
Yeah. That's fair. I mean, Brown's still out with the hamstring, and I don't know.
All right. After that, Marquise Brown, Curtis Samuel, Aaron Rodgers closed out round 9. Darnell Mooney at the turn, as you mentioned. Leonard Fournette, we talked about. Jamal Williams right next to him. Jamal Williams, I think, remains a solid value where he's going. Not an exciting player, but obviously a solid value. Now, we just talked about putting James Conner together with Chase Edmonds. Would you have considered Jamal Williams over Leonard Fournette for Kevin's team, knowing that he already has DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, I didn't think about that because I was kind of wondering. Like, Williams was the guy I had in mind when Kevin got on the clock in the 10th round there. And I kind of forgot that Fournette was still there. I don't think I would have pushed Williams up the board just because I have Swift, but I kind of prefer him over Fournette anyways. I think kind of like the Cardinals backfield situation. I think Williams could have some standalone value enough for like if you need help on bye weeks, you can throw him in there. A guy who's going to see 8 to 10 carries and a few targets every game, and then if Swift goes down, I think Williams would be a 3-down back there. Again, I know the offense isn't exciting, but I just think volume wise that he'd be an easy fantasy starter with no Swift.
I agree. I think I would go Jamal Williams over Leonard Fournette there because you're not expecting to use either guy early. And I think there's a clearer path to Jamal Williams paying off for you than Leonard Fournette doing so. Of course, there's a chance that Leonard Fournette is just winds up as the top performing back for Tampa without anybody getting hurt. So it's not a strong argument, but slight lean. I think I would say Jamal Williams.
Yeah, Fournette does have the higher ceiling. So, from that perspective, again, in this format, I don't have an issue with Fournette.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, too, if Kevin was disappointed to not get Marquise Brown at that Curtis Samuel spot because that would have given him a stack with Lamar Jackson. I would imagine that that's what he was hoping was going to happen before Curtis Samuel got there, but not to be, did not get the opportunity. We did get a QB stack a couple picks later. Matthew Stafford, drafter, already had Robert Woods on the roster, so we've got a QB wideout stack there. That team looks decently set up outside of Rondale Moore, just waiting there to torpedo the value.
I like that team until I don't like the back-to-back Hines Murray picks. I don't know. I guess he waited on his second and third. It's okay. Yeah, I'm good with that pick, and Rondale Moore is gonna carry him, so he's good.
There you go. Hey, if there's one thing Rondale Moore can do, it's probably carry anybody with the legs that guy has. So I can get behind that. After Matthew Stafford, we had Jarvis Landry, and never exciting, but there are definitely wide receivers that went off the board before him that he should be going ahead of. I would take him over Rondale Moore, probably Marquise Brown at this point. I probably would take Corey Davis first, but I think he and Jarvis Landry look pretty similar in terms of value.
Yeah, I mean, I can pull up his ADP, but he consistently goes mid wide receiver 40s in drafts. And he's going to finish around like wide receiver 30, and he's not going to give you like spike weeks. So he's a guy that's I think better in lineup setting leagues. And he's he's this team's fourth, so you don't need to start him every week. But if in good matchups and bye weeks, I think Landry's a guy you can count on for 4 to 6 catches every week.
Ronald Jones after Jarvis Landry in the same round as Leonard Fournette, 4 picks later. Jonnu Smith after that, the first tight end for the Tom Brady team. What is he, like tight end 14, I think, in this one, an appropriate level for him. And I think Jonnu Smith is kind of the last guy that I'm okay with being my first tight end off the board. Of course, considering that I waited to get that guy as my first tight end.
Yeah, he might be just on the wrong side of that line for me, especially in FFPC where tight ends mean a bit more. Smith out now with the ankle injury. Henry's hurt as well. I think they're both supposed to be ready for week 1. But not ideal, and they're learning a new offense here. I guess Smith's a guy I've taken quite a bit of in best ball. I think both Patriots wide receivers are going to have useful weeks, top 10 level weeks. Lineup setting wise, so I think it might be a bit of a headache.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly agree with that, although this is a format at least where Jonnu Smith's going to be in the lineup whenever he's healthy, because that team now through 13 picks has Jonnu Smith and Jared Cook at tight end. So looking for Jonnu Smith to be a regular starter. Certainly not a comfy spot to be in, but I think that if you're waiting a long time to address the position, is there a spot earlier in the draft that you think that team should have taken a tight end instead and would be in a better spot right now? Maybe Michael Carter versus Robert Tonyan in round 8.
Yeah, or even Gesicki instead of Brady in round 9. I mean, Gesicki to me is almost that last guy I'd feel comfy with as my tight end 1 in this format. So I probably would have gone there.
Yeah, that's fair. Tony Pollard followed Jonnu Smith here, Henry Ruggs, Will Fuller, Marvin Jones, Kenyon Drake at the turn we mentioned. The McCaffrey team then went 3 straight tight ends the past 3 turns. Evan Ingram, Cole Kmet at the 11-12. Evan Ingram was the first tight end for that team. Anthony Ferkser then in round 13. What do you think of this build now?
I don't love it, but I guess I don't hate it because he's kind of set at the other positions. He has his 5 strong wideouts. He got some options behind McCaffrey. He's got a starting quarterback, so don't hate it. It doesn't look very pretty to me though. Ingram, Kmet, Ferkser, it's kind of like bah. Yeah.
So Cole Kmet ahead of Adam Troutman, I think. I wonder how much upside there is to that one. I mean, Troutman's fallen because he hasn't been getting the kind of receiving usage that we were hoping for. But I think if you don't like Adam Troutman at that point, I would just pass on tight end and take something else and wait and see what's left. Because I don't think there's a whole lot to like more about Cole Kmet than Austin Hooper, who went at the end of round 13, which is the same round where that drafter then took Anthony Firkser. So, I mean, I don't know. For me, Cole Kmet's not somebody that piques my interest right now. They did keep Jimmy Graham this offseason, so I would assume that Cole Kmet's going to be the top guy at the position for him. But it's similar to a Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz setup, and neither of those guys is as good as either one that the Eagles has.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, Hooper, I think Hooper's undervalued. I don't want to say like very undervalued, but I think he's undervalued, especially in FFPC with the 1.5 PPR. I think people were excited about him last year, and nothing's changed, right? I mean, it's still kind of Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and then Hooper probably the next option in that passing game. So I think he's undervalued. I think he's a really good pick where he went here.
I think he's undervalued and has a chance to turn into really undervalued. I think he could finish like tight end 9 by the end of the season. We're all like, why didn't we draft Austin Hooper?
Yep.
After that, Evan Engram and Cole Kmet turn. So looking in the rest of round 11, we got Xavier Jones, we got Gus Edwards, we got Gio Bernard, Ryan Tannehill, Terrace Marshall, Trey Lance, Devin Singletary, Naheem Hines, Alexander Madison, Gerald Everett, Rashad Penny. And I said it wrong. Evan Engram, Cole Kmet was not the same turn. It was Evan Engram going to start round 11, and then it was Cole Kmet, Anthony Firkser at the 12-13 turn. But looking through that round, Jared, did anything stand out to you? It seems like good value on Ryan Tannehill, even if he doesn't excite you.
Yep, good value on Tannehill. Gus Edwards sticks out to me. Is my favorite running back in that round. He out snapped J.K. Dobbins with the first team offense in the second preseason game. I don't that Dobbins is going to be the best fantasy play there, but kind of it was a reminder that like Edwards is going to play a big role. He's not going away. He's good. He looked awesome in that game. The PFF metrics, I looked up after watching that game, and they confirmed what you saw with your eyes. He was breaking tackles, picking up yards after contact. He's good. There's no reason for the Ravens to go away from him. I know he's not going to catch a lot of passes, but in the 11th round, he's a guy that you can use in a pinch, even in PPR leagues.
To me, if you're excited about J.K. Dobbins right now, you're willfully ignoring that the Ravens brought back Gus Edwards when they could have let him go somewhere else and just, drafted somebody else in round 3 or 4 if they didn't like him that much. They like him. He's not going anywhere. And that's what makes me not at all excited about J.K. Dobbins this season.
Yep, totally agree.
So elsewhere, the next round was Marquez Callaway, James White, Jacoby Myers, Latavius Murray, Rashad Bateman, Devontae Parker, Damian Williams, Russell Gage, Adam Troutman, David Johnson, Brian Edwards, Cole Kmet. I liked Rashad Bateman before he got hurt. Now that he's hurt, it's tough for me to like him before the very end of a draft because not only is he out into the regular season almost definitely, but I mean, once he comes back, he's probably behind Marquise Brown and Sammy Watkins in what's going to be a low-volume pass offense.
Right. I mean, it's probably going to be the second half of the season before there's any chance you can throw him in a lineup. We took Bateman last night. It was quite a bit later than this. I think it was like around 15 or 16. As our, I think, 7th or 8th wideout, just a guy to stash and see what happens. Brian Edwards is my guy in the 12th round. I'm excited about him. I think there's a chance he leads Raiders wide receivers in fantasy points this season.
Yeah, I agree. And you still get people who are like, yeah, Brian Edwards, who fell on his face last year. The thing is, you don't have to pay that much to get him. Round 12 here, as you said, the end of round 12. I mean, what's after him? T.Y. Hilton, Jalen Reagor, a couple other guys who didn't exactly light things up last year. So if Brian Edwards doesn't work out in round 12, you're going to be okay. And if you're not okay, then it was not Brian Edwards that killed your team this season. Cole Kmet finished round 12, round 13. Anthony Firkser, J.D. McKissick, T.Y. Hilton, Justin Fields. That's the second quarterback for the Josh Allen team. Trey Lance also was drafted as the second quarterback for a team here. And we're going to get to Jalen Hurts being somebody's starter later in this round. So after Justin Fields, we had Jalen Reagor, Jared Cook, Phillip Lindsay, Kenneth Gainwell, Zach Ertz, and then Jalen Hurts at 13-10 in this draft as the first quarterback for the team that had TJ Hawkinson earlier, Dallas Goedert as a second tight end. What do you think about Jalen Hurts' fall? Do you think that maybe, I don't know, this is a league that's particularly scared of stomach infections?
I think it's the Deshaun Watson thing, I guess, but I don't know. The closer we get to September, it's like, when's the trade going to happen? He'd have a brand new offense to learn. We still don't know if he's going to be eligible to play any or how much this season. So I don't get why Hurts is fine. I think he's a steal there. And this team should add a quarterback too, I think, pretty soon, just as insurance. Mm-hmm. Hurts is still unproven, but man, I still think he's a really good bet to be like a top 10 fantasy quarterback whenever he starts, just because of the rushing.
Yeah, he's QB 14 here. I mean, it's not hard to get a second quarterback. You can take him and take somebody like Kirk Cousins or Baker Mayfield or even Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, that range. You can find insurance. So, I mean, it's not a best ball team where you're going to be giving away a roster spot if Jalen Hurts does all of a sudden back up Deshaun Watson. And obviously, the more likely scenario is that they don't trade for Deshaun Watson at this point. Jalen Hurts is the starter, and he presents the upside that he showed us last year by being one of the top scoring players in all of fantasy over the 4-week span where he was a starter.
Yeah, I'm looking at this board and going to force myself to maybe wait on quarterback in my draft on Thursday. Like, they and this is this is pretty normal. Not Hurts going that late, but they do drop in these main event drafts. Again, I think it's different in lineup setting leagues versus best ball. So yeah, I'm going to be tempted by some of those earlier guys, but I might try to get myself to pass.
Yeah, I think the key way to approach quarterback this year is you start by looking at that group of top 6 or top 5, depending on how exactly you separate things up there. But you look at that group, you consider them if somebody slides past ADP, but don't feel like you need them. And then just pick out a quarterback here and there at each level where you're like, okay, if I don't like what's staring at me in round 8, I'll take this guy. If I get to round 9, I still need a quarterback and I don't like the receivers there, then I'll take Stafford or whatever. There are lots of paths to take here. Don't treat it like you need one of the top 6 quarterbacks, I think is the key to attacking that position this season.
Yeah. I mean, Joe Burrow went in the 14th round. Like, we talked about how we're lower than consensus on him, but like, I mean, yeah, I'd be fine with Hurts Burrow or Justin Fields Burrow, like the 2 of those guys, I think, and you can get him in round 13, 14 is nice.
Kevin followed Jalen Hurts with Darrell Williams at 13, 11. Then it was Austin Hooper to close out round 13 after the likes of Jared Cook, Zach Ertz, Adam Troutman, Anthony Firkser, Cole Kmet, all those guys. So Austin Hooper, an undervalued player at this point, and a good target, I think, in FFPC drafts in particular. Chuba Hubbard after that to start round 14. Then Justin Jackson to Kevin's team. Devontae Booker looks like an auto pick, but I think that's a fine area in which to take Devontae Booker. Now, we talked about pairing running backs together. Jared, should Kevin have taken Devontae Booker to pair with Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I mean, generally I don't like it because I don't think you ever want Devontae Booker in your starting lineup, even if he's going to be the Giants' lead back for the first game or two. Because he's middling talent. I don't think he'd get the Saquon Barkley workload. I mean, looking at Kevin, even Kevin's team, like waiting on his, third running back. Even if Barkley's out week 1, I'd still rather start Fournette, I think, than take a chance on Booker. So I'm fine, not even bothering with Booker there.
Yeah, I'm fine with not drafting Booker. I do think that this is another different situation where maybe you go ahead and take the handcuff because there's at least a chance that Barkley isn't the starter around week 1. I would guess at this point that he is the starter in week 1. But there is that chance, I think. So maybe it's a spot where I handcuff Booker. Definitely not essential, but one where I consider it, whereas usually I would absolutely not. After Devontae Booker, we had Tua Tagovailoa, then Joe Burrow. As you mentioned, both of those guys backup QBs to their teams. Blake Jarwin, Darrington Evans, also did not go to the Derrick Henry team, although pick right before the Derrick Henry team in this particular round. Rob Gronkowski went after Darrington Evans, Emmanuel Sanders. Then the first defense, the Rams D, went at 14-10. Tevin Coleman after that, Sterling Shepard at the end of round 14. Anything stand out to you in that round, Jared?
Again, I think the quarterbacks, being able to get Tua, who, he goes ahead of Burrow here. That would have sounded crazy a month ago. But I don't think it's crazy now because, Burrow has had his issues and Tua has looked, to me, like a guy ready to, take that second-year leap in the preseason, even without a lot of his weapons. He hasn't had Fuller or Devontae Parker in these preseason games. And I think Tua's looked really good. Other than that, I guess, Emmanuel Sanders is a guy I like. I think, he could be the number 2 wide receiver for the Bills this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's a range to get excited, but if you're getting excited about your round 14 picks, then you're probably getting a little too excited about your team in general. After Sterling Shepard at the end of round 14, Cole Beasley to start off round 15. We'll finally get to see pretty soon whether his whole COVID rant and anti-vaxxer thing affects him this season. we've had some effects of guys who have gone unvaccinated so far. So it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility for Cole Beasley to miss some time this year. But in round 15, you're getting the discount to deal with that. If he does nothing, then you lose nothing. And Cole Beasley certainly could finish among the top 30 wideouts. Not a high ceiling guy even week to week, but a good value at this point.
Definitely.
Hunter Henry followed him in round 15. Are you drafting Hunter Henry at this stage of a draft? I guess in general, and then how do you feel about him as your second tight end as he is for this team?
I think it's fine to have Henry as your tight end too when you have Mark Andrews. If you have one of those top 6 guys, I think it's totally fine. I like Henry over Gronkowski, over Jarwin, over Jared Cook, over Zach Ertz. So yeah, I think that was good value on Henry in the 15th.
I think that I might lean Ertz over him right now, but otherwise I'm fine with Henry over the rest of those guys. And that, that's in a range too, where it's like, okay, if for that guy, for this guy, I don't really care about any of them, but I'm very curious to see what happens with Zach Ertz. First, if he starts the season with the Eagles, and second, what his target count looks like once the season does start.
Yeah. I'm trying not to let myself forget that he looked like crap last year. And like, I don't know. I thought he was just done, like watching him last year. And I know he's supposedly looked better. I think he's looked okay in the preseason. Like, nothing special, but he's looked okay. So I think
that's Zach Ertz most of the time. He's much more of an okay looking player than Dallas Goedert at any point. I mean, if you had taken them both in their second seasons, you'd have been like, oh, why are they throwing the ball to Ertz with Dallas Goedert out there?
True. That is true.
The same team that took the first defense also took the first kicker with Justin Tucker in round 15. Jared, are you ever the team that takes the first defense or the first kicker in one of these?
I'm not, but Gilds was on the stream with us last night. He was saying at least a kicker, he likes getting one of those top end guys. He thinks they're reliable. Like Justin Tucker is always a top 8 kicker, I guess. Harrison Butker, I think, is like a safe guy. So I don't know. He said he takes those top kickers quite a bit, and he's had plenty of success. So.
I mean, it's easy to say, why are you drafting a kicker this early? But it's also round 15. I mean, Ty Johnson's probably not winning the league for anybody. Ramondre Stevenson's probably not winning the league for anybody. So why not? Justin Tucker especially is going to be a fun kicker to watch because he at least appreciates fantasy, and he's just fun to watch.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's more likely to help your team, obviously, than these other guys. I mean, these other guys, if they hit, they're going to be more valuable than Tucker, but the odds of them hitting are just very low.
Ty Johnson did come next, and actually that brings us to the Jets backfield. So he's the third running back off the board here, but Michael Carter last game didn't play until the second half. It was Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman splitting first-team work. I mean, how are you addressing or approaching this Jets backfield, if at all, right now?
Yeah, I mean, I do still think Carter should be the first one off the board because, I mean, it looks like he's not going to be someone we can use in fantasy lineups early on, but it's a long season, and I do think he's going to work himself into a role, especially in the passing game. Tevin Coleman, even in his prime, was, a decent committee back, and now he's like 28 years old. Ty Johnson's a guy I do kind of like, but I mean, he's nothing special. So Coleman and Johnson are both fine shots to take at this range, just in case one of them emerges as a clear lead guy, but I guess in general, the Jets backfield is just in a void for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it is for me. But in this late range, I'll take a Tevin Coleman, maybe Ty Johnson. I don't think I've taken him yet. But as we get into the more lineup setting leagues and fewer best ball, I'm certainly fine with take Ty Johnson there because, I mean, he could wind up leading the backfield in points and coming well behind Michael Carter. I agree Michael Carter's first, but it's generally a backfield I don't want pieces of. So I'm approaching it basically like the Miami backfield.
I was going to say, I like Salvon Ahmed, I think, better than both those guys, Coleman and Ty Johnson. Like, I think he was good when he got chances last year. I think he's looked good in the preseason. And, if Brown or Gaskin goes down, then I think, Ahmed might get enough work where you can actually use him in fantasy lineups.
It bothers me that after he produced last year and Myles Gaskin came back, they were like, see ya, dude. We don't need you anymore. And then they went and signed Malcolm Brown right at the beginning of free agency. I point to that, but last offseason they traded for Matt Breida and they signed Jordan Howard, and then neither of them did anything, and they wound up getting dumped. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Malcolm Brown is ahead of them, but it bothers me that they didn't seem like they loved Salvon Ahmed last year.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, again, he's not a special player, but I think he's better than Malcolm Brown. I'll say that.
I mean, I'll give him that. He's probably more of an upside player, and I don't really have anything strongly against him, but that's what keeps me from drafting him in this range. Speaking of keeping me from drafting, Ramondre Stevenson, I'm a little bit surprised, first of all, that he's not going a little bit earlier after scoring 2 touchdowns in each of the past 2 weeks. But I'm also, I guess, kind of relieved. I guess that drafters are not pushing him up the board. It'd be nicer for me if people were drafting him, because I don't think he's going to really help your roster this year unless a couple of players get hurt or traded away Sony Michel ahead of him.
That's what I was going to say. If Michel gets traded or cut, then Stevenson becomes a guy I'm interested in. But if Michel is still on that roster, for week 1, I think Stevenson is third in line for that big back role. We know White's going to do all the pass catching stuff. So, I mean, the 15th round, he's a stash. And again, if Michel gets cut, then I like him as a 15th round pick.
I'll be surprised if they cut Sony Michel for nothing. I would not be at all surprised if he gets traded. If Atlanta doesn't pick up one of these down the roster crowded backfield players, I will be surprised and wonder why they're not.
And then you'll have to draft some Mike Davis, I think.
At that point, if we get to September, 5th, if we get to the week of the regular season, then maybe at that point I'll be like, all right, fine, I guess I'm going to draft Mike Davis. If he makes it to round 6, I'm still not touching him in round 5.
Got it.
After Ramondre Stevenson, we had Gabe Davis, Eric Ebron, Traquan Smith, the Bucs defense, AJ Green, Marquez Valdez-Scantling at the end of round 15. So that's Traquan Smith going, 3 rounds after Marquez Callaway. Do you think that's appropriate, or are we overvaluing Marquez Callaway at that price?
I think Callaway went a bit earlier than I take him, and like Smith went a bit later. To me, they should be going about in the same range. I mean, Marquez Callaway has been dominating camp because he's competing with Deontay Harris and Lil Jordan Humphrey. Like Traquan Smith's been sidelined, which is a concern. Traquan's had the leg injury. But I don't know. I think Traquan Smith is at least as good as Marquez Callaway when he's healthy.
I would have trouble naming my son Lil Jordan and thinking that he's ever going to be taken seriously at what he's doing.
NFL, so I mean,
I know, but every time I hear his name, I chuckle and I wonder when he's going to get big enough to be just Jordan. I don't know. I guess we'll see. AJ Green, I know I'm going to say his name over and over again just because it bothers you. And actually, it should bother you even more because he's on Kevin's team here. Followed the James White, Darrell Williams, Justin Jackson trifecta with AJ Green as his 6th wide receiver on that roster. And then Anthony McFarland just to get some backup Steelers on there. What do you think?
No, I've taken some AJ Green with your voice in my head. Again, just the investment in that Cardinals offense, and we talked about it on the podcast with Dwayne, but it in preseason week 2 is the same, where it looks like Rondale Moore is their slot guy. So that means Green and Christian Kirk are battling for that second outside spot opposite DeAndre Hopkins, and with the contract they gave AJ Green and the fact that Christian Kirk just really hasn't been good, I do think Green is the favorite for that spot.
That's my goal in all things, just to be the voice inside people's heads and whatever subject I'm trying to address. So I mean, I agree with AJ Green for those reasons. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, as I said, after AJ Green there. Back around, we've got Jake Funk. Jake Funk, by the way, went, 4 rounds plus a little bit behind Xavier Jones. So we're still looking at Xavier Jones, we meaning the draft community, as the second back up in the Rams backfield. And by the way, that reminds me, it's a mild thumb sprain for Darrell Henderson, according to reports so far. They expect him to be ready for the opener. I think we'll see beyond that how healthy he is before then, but a mild thumb sprain. So that might spur the team to make a move in the backfield, considering that Henderson is probably not going to see any action over the next couple weeks. So they at least need a camp body, and maybe the caliber of player that they bring in might tell us more about what they think of Xavier Jones and Jake Funk.
How is Duke Johnson still sitting out there in free agency, man? He should be signed. He'll end up somewhere, whether it's LA or Atlanta. I was surprised by that Xavier Jones pick in the 11th. Going ahead of Gus Edwards. I mean, that's crazy to me. Going ahead of Devin Singletary. even the pass catchers like Gio Bernard and Naheem Hines, I'd rather have than Xavier Jones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been surprised lately at how early he's going. I think it might be a bit of overrating the Rams backfield and thinking that anybody in there is going to score points. I mean, we had some Darrell Henderson production last year after Cam Akers went down early and he was getting the ball, but we had things mixed up. And I think if Darrell Henderson were to go down, we would get things really mixed up and not get a startable backfield, most likely going forward. I mean, if I were picking, I would say Xavier Jones first right now, but it's not somebody I'm walking out onto a limb for.
Right. If we knew Xavier Jones was the number 2 back for the Rams, I think, the 11th round would be about right.
Also on the injury front, by the way, Adam Troutman went to the locker room on a cart today because of an ankle or foot injury. Now, we always have to check further into the reports of somebody going to the locker room in a cart, because sometimes it means they had to lift him up off the field onto a cart to take him to the locker room. Sometimes it means the guy left the field under his own power, and rather than make him walk all the way to the locker room, they gave him a ride on a cart to get there. So we'll see how serious an injury it is. Certainly hasn't been a positive preseason / training camp for him in terms of buzz versus what fantasy drafters were expecting, though.
Yeah, he's a guy I basically hopped off altogether after that first preseason game. And I think, as you alluded to, there was talk even before that of, him maybe, and really what it is, they just have him blocking too much for, what we want in fantasy. And that there's the, what is it? Juwan Johnson, right? The Juwan Johnson. I'd be curious to see if he goes here in these final few rounds, especially with that Troutman injury.
Yeah, that looks to me like a situation to avoid. You don't want to overreact to preseason, as people say all the time, but there are definitely things that you should react to. And to me, Troutman was somebody that you'd be ready to pounce on if there were positives from training camp and preseason. And if there's not, then it's somebody to just pass on and take something else in that range of tight end, because there's nothing special to unlock there. It's just looking for somebody that we can count on for regular production.
How bad is that Saints pass catching core? If we know Thomas isn't going to be out there week 1. If they're missing Troutman too, it's ugly.
Yeah, I mean, we could get 12 targets for Marquez Callaway right away, and maybe 4 for Traquan Smith.
You get 8 for Lil Jordan.
That's right. He might finally shed the Lil and become a man. So getting back to these picks, we did have Harrison Butker go off the board as a second kicker right after Anthony McFarland. Then it's defense time en masse. We got the Patriots, then the Broncos, Nico Collins, Washington defense after that. The Broncos have been a particular target for me on defense because they opened the season with a nice start. The first 3 games, have it up over here. Let's see. Denver, they're at the Giants, at Jacksonville, home for the Jets. After that, it's Baltimore and Pittsburgh, so I don't know if I'm using them in weeks 4 and 5, but there's a chance that Denver is like a top 5 defense for the first 3 weeks of the season.
Yep, they've been a target of mine. I know San Francisco opens versus Detroit. So those have been kind of the 2 defenses I've been targeting in lineup setting leagues so far.
Mm-hmm. So after Washington, we had Nelson Aguilar, Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb. I'm surprised that Sammy Watkins isn't going consistently ahead of Rashad Bateman now, because we have the injuries to both Bateman and Marquise Brown. Sammy Watkins is healthy right now, right? I just realized that I don't know that for sure.
I haven't heard that he's not. So
okay. I was making sure I didn't miss anything, but to me, that's just such like a bunched wide receiver core that why wouldn't you just take the healthy one right now? It surprises me that Sammy Watkins is going third. I think people are a little bit overly down. Not saying I'm excited about him, but in a range where you're looking for some upside, there's a chance Sammy Watkins leads the Baltimore wide receivers in targets this year.
Yeah, I mean, people just hate Sammy Watkins in general, and I guess they probably should, because he has, mostly disappointed. But yeah, I think that's why he drops as far as he does.
Just make sure you don't ask him, because he'll probably come up with some crazy conspiracy theory for why he's going this late in drafts. Randall Cobb after Sammy Watkins. What?
I was gonna say I would just love to sit down and have a beer with Sammy Watkins.
I guess there would have to be a third party. I'm not sure I would do it one-on-one.
Fair.
Randall Cobb after Watkins here, OJ Howard, Pittsburgh defense. Then it was Kadri Allison in round 17, Jerick McKinnon. Are you drafting Jerick McKinnon at all?
I mean, I definitely prefer Darrell Williams. But I mean, McKinnon's worth a shot at some point. I mean, if Edwards-Helaire misses time, it's not going to be all Darrell Williams. I think McKinnon would get in there too.
To me, I would rather take Kylan Hill, I think, at this point, than
I am
Jerick
so
McKinnon.
happy Kylan Hill's getting drafted in redraft leagues. That's awesome. I love Kylan Hill, but I did not expect to see this.
Yeah, I mean, it's recent buzz, but it sounds like
Yeah.
he's getting involved. It looked like he was getting involved. He had a nice second preseason game. And, it's not so much that he's going to start going early. It's just the second to last round here. I think it's a good spot to take a shot on him. We all know that Aaron Jones has missed games just about every season so far. And A.J. Dillon is not a pass catcher. We'll see what he does on that front this year. But there's room for Kylan Hill to be immediately involved to some degree, and then obviously handcuff upside, with two guys who could go down.
Yep, and he's good at football, so that helps too.
Mark Ingram, that's a name that I did not expect to see come up. He split the first team spot with David Johnson on their first unofficial depth chart. I don't know. Mark Ingram, I'm not drafting. I guess I've been waiting longer on David Johnson and not enthusiastic about Phillip Lindsay. I don't think I'm ever going to get to Mark Ingram this season.
Yeah, Lindsay went in round 13 and David Johnson went in round 12. So in the second preseason game, Ingram and Lindsay split early down work with the starters, and then David Johnson played third downs again. Splitting early down work on the Texans is not going to do it. But I guess he's like a Phillip Lindsay injury away from maybe being a guy you can get 12 carries a game out of.
Ooh, 12 Texans carries a game. Yeah, it's a no for me. Kylan. Okay, so in that same round, we had Kylan Hill go next, Van Jefferson, Brashad Perriman, Pat Freiermuth, Chris Evans. Chris Evans, somebody I'd be more interested in than Mark Ingram for sure. I'm more interested in than Jerick McKinnon as well. I just think there's more upside to Chris Evans at this point than there is Jerick McKinnon. But, it's tough to argue against taking a Chiefs backup running back if Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I guess especially while Clyde Edwards-Helaire is dealing with that ankle sprain.
And we'll have to ask Kevin about this Tony Jones pick.
Well, he's the guy that's supposed to be threatening Latavius Murray, right?
I guess. They have Devontae Freeman too, but he has nothing left. I don't know. I'd still be surprised if they cut Murray, especially with all these pass catcher injuries. I think they're going to have to go run heavy early on. But yeah, I was surprised when that pick came up for Kevin. They're
just going to have to run like a T formation, have three running backs behind the QB, and have Taysom Hill in there. Yeah, they're just going to run like a wing T offense. It's going to be like a service academy for that team, which is probably how it should be based on what they have. But yeah, so we'll see about Tony Jones. Devontae Freeman had so little left last season that the Giants let him go and then rushed out and bought Devontae Booker as soon as they could. So it shows how much he's got going. Niners defense, you mentioned at the end of round 17, we're almost at the end of this draft. So round 18, Donovan Peoples-Jones, your boy, went early. I guess I haven't looked at as many of these in-season management drafts as I have best ball. He's going late in best ball drafts, but I don't know where he's been in this style of draft. What about you?
No, I don't know off the top of my head. I can't remember where he went in our draft last night.
But he did go.
I believe he did. Yeah, it sounds like he's the number 3 there, which the number 3 wide receiver spot in Cleveland's not great because they're still going to be pretty heavy on 2 tight end sets, and they have 2 target hogs in Beckham and Landry. But DPJ, he's one injury away from potentially being a fantasy factor, and you already have Beckham coming off the ACL, so.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at handcuff types in this round. We've got Paris Campbell coming off the board after and Byron Pringle. Those are a couple guys that I'm a little surprised aren't going a little bit earlier right now. I guess Byron Pringle's losing some luster because we've seen Demarcus Robinson working ahead of him, Mecole Hardman working ahead of him. So even if you're in Kansas City, if you're the 4th receiver, you're not going to excite people. Paris Campbell, though, there has been some excitement about him at times, but I think that the Carson Wentz injury basically made people jump off of Paris Campbell.
Yeah, and I just watched that game and wrote some notes up for the preseason week 2 thing that'll hit Draft Sharks on tomorrow. I guess I got to get that finished tonight. But Campbell's usage has been weird. They've been using him on the outside, and he's only been playing in 3 wide receiver sets. And it's been Zach Pascal is the slot guy in 3 wideouts. So Pascal might open the season as their slot guy, between Pittman and Hilton. So I don't know, and I would still expect Campbell to overtake Pascal at some point. So he's still a fine stash, but I just thought that was interesting.
So wait, we've got Pittman and Hilton as the top two, right? And then Zach Pascal as the slot. So
T.Y. didn't play in the second preseason game. So I don't even know, someone else as the other outside guy. And then when they went three wide, it was Pittman and Campbell on the outside with Pascal in the slot. And then when they went two wide, it was Pittman and Pascal on the field.
Okay. Zach Pascal is somebody that I've been drafting late in best ball drafts after hearing that he's been a touchdown scorer in practice and just kind of looking at Colts receivers and seeing them leave the board and also looking at what's there at the very end of underdog drafts. And with all the wideouts getting pushed up the boards, I mean, Zach Pascal is one of those guys where I've seen him get targets. I know that the Colts like him to some degree. And if somebody down here is going to do something unforeseen based on ADP, he looks like a strong candidate to do it.
Yep. And, there's, I think, still a chance that T.Y. is kind of out of gas at some point this year. And then, then maybe you have Pascal and Paris Campbell in the starting lineup.
Quez Watkins has been a camp darling with some downfield speed. He's going to need some help to be relevant, but it sure looks like he's working past Travis Fulgham, and we're just going to have Fulgham do the full disappear at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, Watkins is going to be one of Philly's top 3 receivers to open the season. So
I hope so, based on the way he's been playing. Dawson Knox after that, Colts defense, KJ Hamler, Matt Ryan, Younghoe Koo, Hayden Hurst, the Miami defense, Ryan Suckup, and then round 19, we got Malcolm Brown. It's tough not to like Malcolm Brown in round 19 when Salvon Ahmed is going in round 15 and Myles Gaskin is going in round 6. I mean, like might be a strong word, but that's what makes me like Malcolm Brown is at the very end of the draft. It's like, all right, I'll take Malcolm Brown. There's a chance that in any given week he leads the backfield in touches.
I'll give you that.
That's the case for him. Tyler Bass next, Tyrell Williams after that. And, I still like the upside on Tyrell Williams, the player. He's in a bad spot for maximizing that upside and a bad spot for you feeling good about putting him in a lineup. But, at least he's at the very end of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, why did Brashad Perriman go 2 rounds ahead of Tyrell Williams?
Why is Brashad Perriman getting drafted by anybody at any point now?
I've read some stuff out of Detroit that he might not even be in the starting lineup to open the season. So
I would believe that much more quickly than I would believe that he will be slightly fantasy relevant this season. He's just been set up in such better situations than he is now and has failed miserably at each stop. So he's an absolute zero touch guy for me in drafts all this season. Mo Alley Cox, where are we at on Mo Alley Cox in round 19 of this draft? That's what I figured.
Yeah, I'm not as excited about him as I was. I don't know why. I mean, there's been some Kylan Granson buzz. But I mean, we know rookie tight ends are long shots. And my worry with Mo Alley Cox is they just like him too much as a blocker. He's a good blocker. He's a massive human, and especially with their O-line injuries, maybe they're going to need him to do more of that early on. So I'm not as excited as I was, but I'd like him in the 19th round still of an FFPC draft.
Oh, yeah, and as the third tight end for that team, maybe the second tight end if they did lose Adam Troutman to a serious injury, but we'll see.
There goes Juwan Johnson right there.
I was going to say. So what do you think about Juwan Johnson now?
I mean, he's a converted wideout, which is what you want out of a fantasy tight end, right? And I mean, I think he might have already been their lead pass catching tight end without a Troutman injury. And if Troutman's out, then I mean, and they could still add someone. I mean, maybe that's a Zach Ertz trade destination. I don't know. But again, especially in these lineup setting leagues where most of these late round guys are going to get dropped anyways. Like it's riskier in best ball because you don't want to be taking zeros all year from a guy. Mm-hmm. But in a lineup setting league, you're going to end up dropping half of these late round picks anyways.
Yeah, this is definitely a time for a why not shot on somebody like that, especially in tight end premium. And speaking of tight end premium, so Kevin's got Darren Waller in the first round. I forgot about that and was looking at his roster as we have it scrolled down to exclude round 1. I was about to say that Gerald Everett's his only tight end, but no. Not the case. Darren Waller, Gerald Everett, the 2 tight ends for Kevin's team. So have we officially moved to the point where a converted wide receiver is what you're looking for at tight end as opposed to a former basketball player?
Yeah, I think the basketball pipeline is dried up, so we're moving on to the wideouts.
Now you want somebody converted from another position, whether it's Logan Thomas from quarterback or
there you
somebody who used to be what you don't want anymore is Pat Freiermuth, it sounds like. Guys who were strictly tight ends in college.
Yeah, no tight ends at tight end.
So we are in the final. This is the final round, right? It's 20 rounds in these things?
Yep, this is it.
So you guys are almost rid of us, but we'll get through the end of this draft. We got in round 20, Greg Zierlein, Chargers defense to Kevin's team, Zach Wilson as the second quarterback for the Jalen Hurts team. And so Jalen Hurts, Zach Wilson, I mean, would you want somebody sturdier than that behind Hurts, or do you like that, Jared?
Yeah, I would have wanted someone sturdy. I mean, like even Trevor Lawrence ended up going in the 17th round. Like if I'm the Hurts drafter, I'm taking him in, round 15 or 16. I don't know. I guess we're talking, Lawrence versus another rookie in Wilson. But I prefer Lawrence there. I think he's probably going to be just fine. Like again, to me, Hurts is likely to be Philly starter all year long, and if he is, he's going to be a weekly fantasy play.
And I mean, plus, it looks like we're about to see Derek Carr not get drafted here. Baker Mayfield's not on the board anywhere, right?
Jeez, he's not. Ben Roethlisberger's not going to get drafted. I mean, yeah, there's always starters on the waiver wire in these FFPC leagues.
Yeah, so if we get a Deshaun Watson trade, Deshaun Watson, by the way, also has not been drafted in this particular draft. So if we do get a Watson trade to Philly, which, again, we still have to bet that that's not going to happen. But if it does, and Jalen Hurts is not a starter, that team can still pick up somebody off the wire. So we'll see where that goes, both for them and for Philly and for the rest of us. Darwin Thompson after Zach Wilson, Josh Reynolds, Mason Crosby, Sam Darnold also came off the board ahead of Baker Mayfield and those other guys we were just talking about. Is Kirk Cousins? He's still not drafted in this draft either. Wow. So we've got Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson going ahead of Kirk Cousins in this draft.
Yeah, that's surprising.
I mean, I was giving you a hard time earlier about taking Justin Fields as your top quarterback and lucking into Kirk Cousins still being there. But after watching the way this goes, I apologize. I think Justin Fields as the first quarterback makes more sense now than I thought it did 24 hours ago.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And yeah, again, I'm going to try to remember this on Thursday night that, and again, this is pretty normal where you can get viable quarterbacks near the end of these FFPC drafts. I mean, I don't know if I'd wait till, around 15 or 16, but again, you can wait and then grab a pretty solid second guy and be just fine at quarterback. Yeah,
shows you what's possible. And speaking of what's possible, same round that we saw Darwin Thompson, the fourth Chiefs running back, go. Sony Michel comes off the board. Yeah. Boston Scott should be the number 2 back for Philly. We'll see about Gainwell, but he came off the board rounds earlier. And then Sony Michel, I think if he's not second in New England in terms of running backs as we open the season, then it'll be because he's higher than that on somebody else's depth chart somewhere else. So I like Sony Michel as an end of draft stash.
Exactly. I mean, I think he should be going, 5 rounds earlier up, with the Ty Johnsons and with the Salvin Ahmeds and Ramondre Stevenson. That's kind of where I'd put Michel.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that's going to do it for this live stream of Kevin's FFPC main event draft, and of course the other 11 drafters that took part in it with him. You can head over to draftsharks.com now, become a DS Insider, set up your draft war room to get set for your own draft. We're here waiting to help you. We've got the rankings up there. We've got the content that's been coming out for weeks to this point. We've got more stuff coming out this week and beyond, right up to the regular season. And then, of course, we'll switch over to regular season mode and keep helping you manage that team throughout the year. So come join us for free. You can join the Draft Sharks Discord, talk with us directly, talk with a sharp group of experienced drafters, whether you're a high stakes player, DFS player, home league player, whatever you're playing, you can talk to us about all of it. You can find the link to that in the YouTube stream for this, in most of our podcast posts at this point, and on the Draft Sharks timeline on Twitter. So for Jared Smola and the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaff saying thanks so much for swimming with us.